Chapter 45, 67. Huh. This slap was clearly far away from the zombie, but it seemed to be folded in the void, and was severely thrown on the 9 heads of the zombie. Suddenly, the 9 heads of the zombie shook for a while, and a red 5-finger fingerprint appeared. Bite 1, you look for death. For a moment, the zombie was furious, his face was extremely blue, and violent murder broke out all over his body, with 1,000 devil around the snake god. Suddenly it seemed to turn into a glacier of thousands, and the coldness of Sun Han was like the sea of anger. I can't help but humiliate him for a while. However, just as the zombie was about to attack, I saw one swooping with his right hand, and a huge prism with the word phasing in his hand appeared in his hand. Taking a look of calmness, she took a look at the zombie, who was about to fall into madness, and said indifferently, "Snake God, I am acting on the command of the Lord. Are you sure you want to stop me? Do you want to fight against our organization?" As soon as this word came to an end, the zombie who had already planned to perform a killing move suddenly stagnated, changing his pupils to shrink, and his expression became cloudy and uncertain. Eat the Emperor. The name is definitely a nightmare in the virtual universe. For the zombie god, bite him without fear. Even tie up the whole bite tissue. His zombie does not look at him. But the Emperor, he really can't understand the details, and dare not act rashly. Even if the Real who stepped up to that point was silent, he did not mention the person who ate the Emperor. From this, it is speculated that the Emperor Bleeder is very likely to be completely out of that step. After I was silent for a moment, the zombie took a deep breath and made a cold hum. Don't go over and stop talking. Apparently, he has been subdued. When several people behind Yen Xiaoi saw this, their faces were full of shame. Suddenly, he stopped looking at the zombie god, but turned his eyes to Feng Tian's ancestor. Calmly, "You're called Feng Tian, right? Lord the Emperor has orders. If you are willing to give up resistance, the Lord Emperor is willing to include you in the organization." He froze for a while, and then continued to speak. "Feng Tian, you join the phagocytosis, we can make you take that step completely without being bound by the cosmic luck." As soon as this remark came to an end, not only did Feng Tian's ancestor's face change, even the snake turned his head violently, looking at Yan's masked face, and a shock came from his eyes. Having reached their realm, I naturally know how difficult it is to really take that step. Otherwise, it will not start from the birth of the universe. The 2 universes, the divine universe and the virtual universe, have only 2 people, the virtual and the snake god. And now, Yen Yi said that they can make them free from the constraints of the universe and take a step forward. This is incredible. Many divine beings on the side of the divine power universe. After hearing this sentence, their eyes were condensed on the face of Feng Tian's ancestors, and there was a touch of despair. Now that the of the universe is no longer there, the ancestors who are the highest in the audience are the ancestors of Feng Tian. If the ancestors of Feng Tian choose to take refuge, they will completely lose their resistance. I saw Feng Tian's ancestors heard the words, narrowed his eyes and looked at the one. The corners of his mouth slowly cracked, showing a smile, and spit out 5 words, "Go." Eggs. After gnawing at the words, he was not angry or furious, but sighed softly. "Pity." Immediately, he said indifferently, "Kill then, divine universe, one is not left." "Yes." Suddenly, the 6 people behind the first bite all walked out laughing, twisted their necks, and their faces were full of cruel smiles. "It's finally possible to do it. It's been too long, too long." Saying a flesh ball eating tissue, Yin said, "Eat you guys." Another weird man with a full mouth is holding out his tongue and licking the corner of his mouth, showing greed in his eyes. Devouring again looked at the zombie with a negative hand, with a bit of command. "You and the virtual universe also do it." Bite 1. "Are you ordering this seat? I tell you, you are still too tender." The viper laughed suddenly. I waited for him to finish, and then interrupted indifferently. After all this, I will sue the Lord Eater, and let you join the Eater. It is good. The serpent took a deep look and said, Bite one, remember what you said. After he finished speaking, the zombie glanced across the faces of the virtual universes of the virtual universe. His eyes flashed through the murderous words, and he spit out 3 words. Kill me. Boom. The words of the crickets dropped, and the zombie figures suddenly shuttled. 9 heads were opened at the same time, and they bit down fiercely towards Feng Tian's ancestor. Kill. Dreams of the divine universe. Die. Ha 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 ha. Kill them all. Numerous virtual respects laughed loudly, immediately following the zombie god. When Feng's ancestor saw this, instead of flinching, instead his eyes rose to war, and Su laughed. If you want to conquer the divine universe, you don't see enough. Boom. The old ancestor of Feng Tian waved backwards. Behind him, a $1 billion gully-long mark was directly blasted, solemnly speaking towards Jian Wushuang and others. You retreat. Remember, as long as our divine power and the universe continue to burn and continue, there will be dawn in the future. The utterance of the words fell, and the ancestor of Feng Tian no longer hesitated, determined to burn the source of life, and rushed towards the people who ate tissues and snake gods and countless virtual universes. This time, the ancestor of Feng Tian soared. My husband is sealed. Come and die today. I stepped out 1 step. Feng Tian's ancestor broke through. The breath soared again, and there was only a slight difference from the realm of the gods. Suddenly, whether it is a snake or a person who eats tissues, his pupils shrink and his eyes flash with fear. Rewind. This man is desperate. Retreat first. He can't hold on for long. Suddenly, the countless vagrants who were rushing towards Fengshen's ancestors, as if they had stepped on the sudden brakes, their faces changed greatly, and then they retreated. Feng Tian Patriarch. On the magical side of the universe, countless people saw this scene and immediately burst into tears. Do not. Countless people want to rush away and help Feng Tian's ancestors. However, it seems that the gully tentacle that Feng Tian's ancestor had waved before had already expected this step, just like invisible glass, stopping them all from entering. When the ancestor of Feng Tian saw this, he turned his head back. His face was so cold and somber that he cried, Don't you understand my husband's words? Come on. Keep your life, you just hope. This word fell, and suddenly countless people broke their hearts and hearts, looking at the virtual universe, full of endless resentment. Back. At this moment, the patriarch sighed. Don't let the sacrifice of Feng Tian's ancestors and Lord gods go to sacrifice. Only alive will have a future. Someday we can make a comeback. Chapter 45-68. The battlefield outside the region is a sad one. First, the Supreme Gap, who soared into the sky with his incarnation, made a brilliant blow and started the first battle. Later, there was the Cosmic God, who continued to burn the universe in order to protect the magical power inherited continuously and transformed chaos to suppress the virtual for 10,000 years. Until now, the ancestor of Feng Tian burned his life and turned it into a wall, seeking a way of life for the divine universe in the midst of thousands of calamities. A predecessor of the predecessor, for the divine power of the universe, went forward and fell in the hands of the virtual universe. Difficult to hate Fan Xingxuang, poor new stop turbid glass. These seniors martyrs, respect. Let's go. The patriarch sighed lightly and said, Everyone, from now on, let us save our lives and protect ourselves. When we shake the flag in the future, we will wait for the revival of the divine universe. Having said that, the patriarch's ancestor grabbed his right hand, grabbed the overwhelming overlord, and immediately stepped away, striding away. He didn't regret his life. He just knew that the dilemma of the divine universe has now been settled. Only by retaining a useful body can we contribute to the revival of the divine universe in the future. We are defeated. The martyr, the gourd fairy, poured a glass of wine from the gourd and sprinkled it on the infinite starry sky of the divine universe. This cup, respect the cover, worship the gods of the universe, honor the ancestors of the heavens, and honor my divine power, the universe, and the millions of spirits. Immediately, the martyr sighed and went away. After the martyrs left, many sages gathered in the extraterritorial battlefield side and began to disperse. Of course, there are people with a sense of death who choose to stay on the battlefield and fight desperately with the virtual universe. The divine power universe never lacks the fierce generation. The captain of the 7th team, Heiyuan Extreme, stayed behind and went to death. Want to leave? The zombie's vertical pupil twisted slightly, looking at the man who fled away from the divine power universe, and a sneer gradually aroused in the corners of his mouth. A group of loose sand. Also want to escape? After that, the zombie shook his head, 4 of the right of the 9 heads, and chose to separate. They directly broke the barriers laid down by Feng Tian's ancestors, led an endless vanity, and hunted toward the divine universe. Sword unparalleled. Let's go. The king of 9 kings looked expressionless and said to Jian Wushuang, "It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded, nodding. He is not a fool. He knows his importance. He knows his talents, and as long as he is given time to grow, he can grow and develop completely. Jian Wushuang is not afraid of death, but he does not want to die here. He still has to keep a useful body, revenge for the supremacy of Gav, revenge for the of the earth, revenge for the ancestor of the heavens, and countless deaths in this battle spirit revenge. Well, the garbage of the magical universe. Let's die. A monster with no arms on the left and 6 arms on the right, holding a large 6-handed sword, chopped down towards the sword, unparalleled. Jian Wu flashed in the eyes of Jian Wu without even looking at him. The 6-armed monster only felt something white and blank, and passed by his eyes. Even if the eyes were black, the whole person lost consciousness. Numerous waters were mixed with stumps and broken arms, and they descended from the air as if they had fallen into a rain. Let's go. Jian Wushuang looked at the king of 9 robbers. The Jiujie dynasty, sword. Wushuang nodded. Today, the 2 should be regarded as the strongest fighting force in the Temple of Life, and they must immediately rush back to the Temple of Life and take them away. Just as the 2 were about to go away, Jian Wu stepped forward, looked at a dejected woman not far away, and said, "Girl, Lan, will you leave with us?" "It is good." Lan, she nodded her head. Today, she still has a blank brain, and her thoughts stay at the time when the of the universe left. Jian Wushuang sighed, sighing without seeing anything. He waved his hand directly and put Lan in the town's monument. Immediately, Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang face shot away. And the other side. Why is it like this? Obviously, it should be peaceful ending. Why the master would die? Lan Su's face was pale, her mouth was tight, her body was weak for a while. His original intention of planting the original seeds for the of the universe was just to let the of the universe see the situation and choose to surrender. At that time, even if the of the gods had been dispelled, the magical universe would be free from disaster and the war would retreat. Obviously, the of truth has promised him. As long as his teacher is willing to let luck, he will retreat. The worst result is nothing more than a divine universe, a subsidiary of the virtual universe. He never expected that the magical universe would fall to this point. Why, I just want to live, and I want everyone to live. Is it wrong? Lan Su clenched her fists, stubbornly but paranoidly said to herself. In his mind, He constantly played back the last look that the of the universe looked at him, strange and disappointed. "You are too naive." The words of the universe kept reminding him in his heart, "Go die." As Lan Su kept losing his mind, a loud laughter burst into the air above him. Lan Su hurriedly looked up to and saw a 5-marked vanity with a halberd and split his face with a sloppy face. What? In the universe, the tragic sound of Lan Su came, and this 5-marked virtual honor with a long halberd, after Lan Su from the top of his head to the waist, split a halberd in half, and then sneered and chased and killed another person. Jian Wushuang, who had already blasted Yuan, looked back at this scene with no expression. "Idiot!" Spit out these 2 words coldly. Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang stepped on one foot, turning into small black spots at the same time, flying towards the starry sky in the distance. The speed was extremely fast. "Kill!" A massacre has begun. Countless monks who have chosen to die in the universe have exploded and do not seek victory, but only to be able to take away a few virtual universes before they die. Heiyuan Supreme cut 18 people in a row and eventually died. A heroic man named Gaishi Haosher, who went forward and succeeded, fell in succession. This day is destined to be a sad day for the magical universe. On this day, the earth trembled, seemingly inductive, sending out a mighty tragedy. A void in the extraterrestrial battlefield, biting a negative hand to stand, watching Jian Wushuang leave. "Hey, bite one. Aren't we going to catch this little guy?" Yen Shi said beside him. I heard a word, and a flash of meaningful light flashed in my eyes, like a smile. "No hurry. He can't escape. Let him escape first. I want to see." Now, the level of the 2 universes is broken. One of the most important chess pieces is desperate, and Xuani can still hide. Yen Shi heard the words beside him and suddenly nodded his head. Everything they do is for Xuani. Cosmic Calendar, 6982 Chaos Period. Divine Power Universe, Declared Fall. Chapter 45, 69. Kill. Outside the battlefield, there is still a killing sound. Countless Supremes chose to fight desperately, and the last one fell into the extraterrestrial battlefield. This killing lasted for 3 days. 3 days later, the entire battlefield outside the region was dead, with countless stumps and limbs remaining suspended in the void, as if silently describing the tragic battle. In the middle of the extraterrestrial battlefield, an old man who was already near the end of the oil lamp and his clothes was broken, sitting cross-legged. Throughout his body, there are countless imaginary cosmic corpses, among which there are no less than 10 6-marked virtual lords, and even 3 of them have died here. On the periphery, there are more vanity staring at the old man with a look of horror. Although he knows that the old man is at the end of his crossbow, he has reached the end of his life, but still hesitates to step forward. They have been frightened by their ancestors. They have never seen anyone who can fight the entire universe with their own power. For 3 days, the ancestor of the letter did not take a step back, and they could not move forward a foot. This is really appalling. In the last catastrophe, the old man hid 100,000 chaos times, and hid 100,000 chaos times. Feng Tian's ancestor sat cross-legged, looking around at the name of a virtual universe, and suddenly smiled. No one around him answered, just holding the sword and looking at Feng Tian's ancestor with a jealous look. After speaking, he looked up at Wu Xingqi and said with a pity, "Speaking of which, those old friends of the past have already left. Even the old man of the universe, this time also left. I fought with him for a lifetime, grabbed a lifetime, and he was ahead of me forever. Unexpectedly, he was 1 step faster for me this last time." With a bitter smile, Feng Tian's ancestor retracted his gaze and lowered his head, and there was no more movement. "Feng Tian, The ancestor died. It wasn't until a long time ago that the vain honors of those who raised their swords slowly entered. Dead. A 5 marked virtual respect, holding a long knife, daring boldly, shouted with a grimace. Immediately, the long knife was severely inserted into Feng Tian's ancestor's body and emerged through the body without dripping any blood. Dead, dead. This devil is dead, at last. Suddenly, there was a rush of ecstasy on the face of the 5 marked vanity, and he pulled back the long knife, intending to completely destroy the Feng Tian ancestor. Call out. Just then, a black robe with a red mask on his face stepped down and appeared in front of Feng Tian's ancestor. He flicked his fingers and directly took the 5 marked virtual respect with a knife, all flying away. This person is exactly one. Later, Bit mentions that Feng Tian's ancestors have exhausted their life, and the fallen corpse, Shun Sheng said, thickly buried. Thick funeral? In the battle with Feng Tian's ancestors, 9 skulls have been blown up, and only 1 skull zombie remains. When he heard the words, he shouted sharply, "Bite one, this person almost destroyed my Daoji. It hurts my source, but I still want to bury it thickly. You give me the body, and I will repeatedly crush and torture it in order to eliminate the hatred of my heart." When did this decision come to you? Yen took a cold look at him, then gently pushed forward with his right hand. Suddenly, the ancestor of Feng Tian's ancestor spontaneously suspended, rising all the way up, and finally disappeared into the cosmic starry sky. Born in the universe, die in the universe, rest in peace. Yen shook her head, then turned around suddenly. Her eyes reappeared fiercely and killed. Kill. Slaughter all forces in the divine universe and reshuffle. Yes. The words fell, and the remaining 4 members of the phagocytosis group, as well as countless vanities, all kneeled on one knee, just now, in the process of fighting with Feng Tian's ancestors. He has already used his strength to conquer everyone in the audience. Suddenly, countless vanities jumped up and flew towards the depths of the magical universe, divine power universe, in the starry sky. The 3 gods are flying fast. These 3 people are the 3 people who fled from the extraterrestrial battlefields, including Jian Wushuang, Jiu Jiawang, and Lan Lan. Jian Wushuang, what shall we do next? After a period of recovery, Lan Lan's mood is better than before. Although she is still immersed in grief, it is not impossible to tell the situation. Now, as the only one who has made friends with him, Jian Wushuang naturally becomes him, and his main body exists. The King of 9 Kings also asked, "Sword is unparalleled, and now the divine universe is broken. I am afraid that people in the virtual universe will not invade in a short time, and we are the equivalent of the divine universe. They never would allow us to exist, so we have to plan for the next step early." Jian Wushuang heard a deep breath and took a deep breath, nodded his head to understand. No need to think about him. The next divine universe is bound to face a big cleansing. All forces will be hanged, all order collapses, and even if there is no hanged power, it will inevitably become a prisoner of the virtual universe. The magical universe will face reshuffle and start a new era. The only way is to hide in the 9 restricted areas. After thinking about it, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, 9 restricted areas. The King of 9 frowned. Good. Sword Wushuang nodded his head and replied, "The 9 great forbidden areas, the 3 dragons, and the Phoenix Kirin each occupy 1, and the ancestors of the patriarchs occupy the glacier forbidden land, and the abyss land occupied by the descendants of the dark devil. The big restricted areas are more mysterious than even the invincible supreme. They can't be guaranteed to come out alive. There has been no news of these 4 restricted areas in these years. If we want to avoid the scourge, we can only hide in these 4 restricted areas. Among King Julian heard no reply, but groaned for a long time before he said, "The sword is unparalleled. The danger of these 4 restricted areas is no less than the threat of the virtual universe. If we enter these 4 restricted areas, we are afraid of death." Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head and replied, "This is not the time to weigh the pros and cons. If there are only 3 of us, the universe is big, and there will always be a hiding place. But do NT forget that the Palace of Life is still tens of thousands of disciples are waiting for us." After Zhu Jiawang heard a word, he stopped speaking, and soared unparalleled. It is a figure turning, looking at the direction of the Temple of Life. His eyes flashed. "Let's go back to the Temple of Life first. We must move all the people of the Temple of Life to the restricted area before the army of the virtual universe rushes to the depths of the universe." Chapter 4570, Among the Cosmic Stars. The 3 men, Jian Wushuang, Zhou Jiawang, and Lan Lan, were flying away in the direction of the Temple of Life. Along the way, many top forces have been aware of the fall of the Divine Force universe, and have packed up their belongings and swept towards the remote parts of the universe. Only those Zoman forces and some mortals living at the lowest level of the universe pitifully still do not know everything, knowing that the world has changed. The whole universe is in a big mess. Among them, a lot of robberies were born. Many were the masters of power or the ancestors of a certain family. In the past, there were big-headed figures. At this moment, they turned into interstellar robbers, ransacked wildly, searched for all supplies, and prepared for their own spiritual practice. Therefore, along the way, there were sorrows and wars. When a person is free from order, he is no different from a beast. Soared unparalleled, slapped a middle-class supreme who couldn't tell the situation and wanted to rob 3 people, and then turned into a fan, then said, "We need to speed up. I'm afraid that many forces have the same intention as us and want to hide in the forbidden area." Zhou Jiawang, Wenyan nodded in agreement. Immediately, the 3 men did not delay anymore, and all released their breath and flew towards the Temple of Life. Some supremes who originally wanted to rob while taking advantage of the fire felt the breath of the 3, knowing that it was Jian Wushuang and the king of 9 robbers. They suppressed the throbbing in their hearts and let the 3 leave. A few months later, the 3 reached the depths of the universe, the Temple of Life. Generally speaking, there is still a bustling scene in the depths of the universe. Obviously, the news that the divine power is broken has not yet been fully transmitted here. The 2 disciples responsible for guarding the gates of the Shrine of Life were quite laid back, chatting casually about the sky. When I saw King Zhujia and Jian Wushuang coming, they immediately played a clever trick and stood up straight and respectfully. "Worthless Supreme 9. Jian Wushuang nodded at him, without delaying the waste of time, but asked directly, "Where are they, the Supreme Master of Blood?" "The Uyghur Supreme Master. They are all in the Supreme Temple." "It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and then stepped on and shot straight into the Supreme Temple. In the Supreme Temple, the 3 are the Supreme of Blood, the Great of the Great Axe, and the Supreme of Heaven. They are talking about the situation of the battle. The words are quite optimistic. Obviously, they have not yet heard the news that the divine universe has been broken. As soon as Jian Wushuang, King Jiucai, and Lan Lan stepped on, facing the gate of the Heavenly Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, and Bloodwave Supreme, they noticed them. "Well, Sword King Wusho Jiujiu, and disciple of Lord God of the Elder God, why are you back?" Tina Supreme frowned and asked, "At this time, shouldn't they be rivals in the extraterrestrial battlefield and the virtual universe? Could it have defeated the virtual universe? Yeah, why do you 3 come back, Gavin Supreme?" The Supreme Axe also asked, The three swordless men did not answer, but faced the slightly expectant and happy eyes of the two, bowed their heads slightly, and sighed. He didn't know how to inform the three of the cruel news. Of the three, only the blood was supreme, and he noticed that the faces of Jian Wushuang's three were not normal. He pressed his hand down and signaled that the great axe and the heavenly supreme were quiet. Immediately, he took a deep breath, looked solemnly at the three men of the sword, and slowly asked, "Swords of Wushuang, is there something happening in the extraterritorial battlefield? You can say nothing. It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He is not an indecisive person, knowing that the news will come to the depths of the universe sooner or later. Now the most important thing is to hurry up and evacuate. Extreme blood, we lost. Swordless eyes flickered and uttered this word by word. As soon as this sentence came to an end, the same stone suddenly stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, and the blood three of the Supreme Three were trembling with anger and shock. What? Failure? The faces of the Great Axe Supreme and the Heavenly Supreme turned wild, shocking. They thought that even if the divine universe could not defeat the virtual universe in a short time, it would never have been possible to defeat it so quickly. Of the three, only the Blood Wave Supreme smiled bitterly, without much surprise on his face. When he saw the three of them appearing together, he felt a kind of bad feeling in his heart, but he did not expect it, as expected. "Well, what about Gav?" Blood Wave Supreme breathed 3 times in a row, and then forcibly suppressed the emotions in his heart and asked, "Jiful Extreme has fallen. Not only Jiful Supreme has fallen, Master Elder God has also died in the extraterrestrial battlefield." Jian Wushuang replied again. As soon as this sentence came to an end, it was as if in the minds of the three Bloodwave Supremes, dropping a bombshell again. The three Bloodwave Supremes heard that their legs were weak, and they almost fell to the ground. How is that possible? How can this be? The blood on the faces of the three Supreme Blood Women was pale, it seemed to be drained of blood, and couldn't believe it. They never thought that, as strong as the Lord God, there would be a day of fall. Isn't that representative? The people of the virtual universe are about to come in. Bloodwave Extreme raised his head tremblingly, looking at Jian Wushuang. "Good." Jian Wushuang nodded his head and replied, "The ancestor of Feng Tian used his life to hold the virtual universe, but I was afraid that he would not be able to hold it for too long, and the people of the virtual universe would not take long to erode the divine power universe." As soon as this word came to an end, the three of Bloodwave Supreme lost their minds again. Fortunately, the three of them are not emotional, but just after losing their souls, they regained their spirits. The past must not be chased. The magical universe has been broken, and the of the universe and the like have died. Next, they should consider what to do in the future. Extreme blood. My opinion is that all of our shrines will be relocated, evacuating from the depths of the universe and looking elsewhere. Sword saw his eyes burning and said, "Everyone move. Look elsewhere." After hearing the brow of Tianyan Supreme, he suddenly shook his head and said, "No, I don't agree. This is the root of the Temple of Life and the place where I was born. I want you to go. I was born in the God of Life. Palace, you will die in the Temple of Life, but once you die, what fear do I have?" Jian Wushuang heard his words, and his brow gradually wrinkled, and he said, "Heavenly Supreme, now is the crucial moment, at a time when life and death are at stake. I hope you can take the overall situation seriously." Jian Wushuang, I know you are kind, but unfortunately, the Palace of Life has great gratitude to my nature. I can't betray it. And leave, you go, I stay here and send the final journey of the Palace of Life. I would like to the Temple of Life is buried together. Tina Supreme said. Jian Wushuang heard the words, could not help but silence. Chapter 45, 71. There was a dead silence in the Supreme Temple. Jian Wushuang glanced at the Heavenly Supreme, and then looked at the Supreme and the Great Axe again, and found that both of them were silent. "Do you think so?" Jian Wushuang asked. Supreme Axe didn't speak, and Bloodwave Supreme said with a bitter smile, "Sword unparalleled, you may not know our situation well. The three of us, when we were weak and humble, emerged from this life temple for us. It is not only the ancestral gate, but also the home. How do you want us to do it and abandon this home? Even mortals know how to protect the home, defend the country, fight for the home, and die for the home. How can I leave my hometown and leave my hometown?" As soon as this remark came to an end, Supreme Axe and Heavenly Supreme both nodded bitterly. Folly! However, this time, the Sword Wushuang, who has always respected the Supreme Master and others, has unexpectedly snapped and interrupted the words of the three. "Every land is lost, and everyone is lost. Extreme Blood, you are seniors. It is reasonable to say that younger people are inconvenient to argue with you, but you have to listen to me. You say that the Life Shrine is home because everyone in the Life Shrine exists, and it is because the disciples in the Life Shrine exist that gives it special meaning. Otherwise, it is just a piece of land. My Sword Wushuang doesn't understand what is right and what is the truth. I only know that he can treat his body with his own way. The virtual universe destroys my divine power. The universe has countless heroes. I must save my life and work hard, grow, so that one day we can make the blood of the universe empty and pay for it, in order to comfort the many heroic spirits who fell on the battlefield outside the world." Jian Wushuang's expression was cold and cold. The three Supreme Blood Waves heard each other, all looking at each other. They never thought that Jian Wushuang would talk to them in this tone. In their impression, Jian Wushuang has always been a modest and gentle person. "Jian Wushuang, it seems you are really grown up." Bloodwave Supreme sighed, not angered, but rather relieved. This represents Jian Wushuang, who already has his own opinions and ambitions. The Supreme God of Heaven nodded and said, "Jian Wushuang, I admit that you are right, but I have decided to coexist and die with the Temple of Life. You can bring other disciples to transfer." Taking a deep breath, Tianshuan Supreme continued, "Jiang Wushuang, with his talents, he must be able to lead the Temple of Life. If he can come back to the great cause one day, he may take care of himself." After waiting for him to finish, Jian Wushuang said again, "Tianshuan Supreme, do you think him talking to you?" Wow! The next moment, a prismatic black iron token appeared in the hands of Jian Wushuang. "Here is the token of the Palace Master. I have no swords, which is the second sovereign of the Palace of Life." Jian Wushuang held the token and spoke indifferently. Wow! Suddenly, no matter whether it is the Supreme of the Blood Wave, the Supreme of the Great Axe, or the Persevering Supreme of Perseverance, even if it is the Jiu Jiawang who is a little far away, when he sees this token, all of them are flashing in his eyes and kneeling directly on one knee ground. "I Blood Wave / Tianxin / Huge Axe / King of the Nine Calamities, meet Lord Gongzhu." Although they do not know where the Palace Master token in the swordless hands came from, the Palace of Life has rules. Those who hold the token of Life Palace are the Masters of Life Palace. At the same time, there was a rush of ecstasy in their hearts. At the beginning, the Life Shrine Palace Master left the Palace Shrine token before leaving. With the disappearance of the Life Shrine Palace Master, this token never came back. And now, this token appears in the hands of Jian Wushuang. Wouldn't it mean that Jian Wushuang saw the Lord of the Palace of Life? Blood Wave, nature, and axe obey orders. Jian Shuang stepped out. His eyes flashed, and he said in a deep voice, "The chief of the palace, heir." And the other three were involved in raising disciples of the life shrine. Later, he and the other masters left the shrine of life and found another one. Rest and rest. Can you wait? As soon as this remark came to an end, the three of Bloodwave Supreme and Tianyuan Supreme looked at each other. I wait. I dare not. The three said, bowing their heads, well, let's do it. With a big wave of his sword, a gentle force suddenly lifted the four people's knees from the ground. Offended just now, Jian Wushuang said a little sorry. This is the etiquette of meeting the lord of the palace. Why did you offend? Bloodwave Supreme shook his head, and then paused. Jian Wu, Master Gongzhu, can the former Gongzhu be fine now? Without waiting for Sword Wushuang's answer, Bloodwave Supreme answered to himself. That's it. I'll talk about this later. I'll get the authors first. After that, Supreme Bloodwave stepped away. Now that it has been decided to move the palace, it is not too late to prepare everything. Master Gongzhu, I will go too. Farewell. Supreme Axe, Heavenly Supreme, 9 Calamities, and others left. In the blink of an eye, the entire Supreme Temple, only Jian Wushuang and Lan Lan, 2 people. Jian Wushuang thought about it and said, Girl Lan Lan, wait a moment here. I'll go back when I go. Okay, you go. Don't worry about me. Presumably your beloved wife has been waiting for you for a long time. Lan Lan put a smile on her face and said, Jian Wushuang nodded and said, yes, she has been waiting for me for a long time. After that, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore, stepped hard, and stood up to the 6th mountain of life shrine. Call out. A stream of light, falling in the manner of the 6th mountain, turned into a sword unparalleled in a black robe. From a distance, Jian Wushuang saw a gentle woman sitting on the shore of the manor's great lake and sprinkling fishing lures, causing fish to scramble for food. Hearing the movement, the frosty frost turned slightly, and he couldn't help but look dumbfounded. Alas! The bait in his hand slipped like a thread, but it was as cold as frost, just staring at Jian Wushuang. Fujun. The next moment, Lung Wushuang got up and ran towards Jian Wushuang, and then bumped into Jian Wushuang's arms. She stretched out her hands and hugged the sword unparalleled, as if to incorporate the sword unparalleled into her body. Shuanger, you have suffered during this time. Jian Wushuang sighed softly and stroked his frosty hair with his right hand, soothing his frosty mood. The pretty girl in her arms was already tearful and choked and lost her voice. For tens of thousands of years, the two had never met, and even the last time Wu Jianshou returned from the virtual universe to Nanxian Xiandao, but went through the house without entering, Jian Wushuang has owed a lot of guilt to it. Chapter 4572. Fujun, you are finally back. Cold as frost tightly held the sword Wushuang. The nails were stuck in the back of the sword Wushuang. Seems to be afraid of such a let go. The sword Wushuang went away. Well, Shuanger let the husband check how much you have improved in this period. Jian Wushuang smiled, patted the frosty back gently, and let it go. HM? Is it about to break the Supreme soon? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and immediately appreciated. It seems that Shuanger has worked very hard this time, and he will soon catch up with his husband. Cold as frost heard the words, forced a smile on his face, but a faint surge in his eyes. She could feel herself, and she had less and less help with Jian Shuang. Although she has exhausted all her efforts to improve her cultivation, she is still farther and farther away from the sword, unparalleled. She was afraid to go on like this, and one day the two would become 2 worlds. Fujun, are you going back this time? Asked as coldly as frost. We'll go. Jian Wushuang nodded. noticing the cold and frosty look. He couldn't help but smile. But this time, we are leaving together. Really? All of a sudden, a look of joy came from the cold, frosty eyes, and he looked forward to Jian Wushuang with his face full of hope. Of course. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and immediately told Lung Rushuang what happened in the outer battlefield. Suddenly, as cold as frost, he became disoriented. They talked a few more. At this time, the king of the 9 dragons, who also lived in the 6th mountain, came flying and said, "Sword, Palace Master, all the disciples have been summoned, gathered at the mountain gate, waiting for your instructions." "It is good." Jian Wu's eyes flickered, bringing cold as frost, swept away towards the mountain gate. When they came to the gate of the mountain, tens of thousands of disciples of life, shrines, had gathered. After tens of thousands of years of rest and recuperation, the Temple of Life has recovered as much as possible and has slightly increased its strength compared with before, showing a flourishing attitude. If you continue to grow with great concentration, it is very likely that you will become the first force of the divine power universe in the future. I'll wait. See Lord of the Warriors' Palace. Seeing Jian Wushuang stepping from the clouds, these disciples all kneeled on one knee and shouted in unison. The sound shook through the clouds. Just a moment ago, they already knew that Jian Wushuang was the master of the Palace of Life, and the news that the divine universe was defeated. Their faces were full and solemn at this moment. "Okay." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Behind him stood the top 4 supremacy of Jiu, Jia, Blood Wave, Giant Axe, and Heaven. "You guys, I want to know that you have already learned about the defeat of the divine universe. Now we have only one way out, and that is to find another place and concentrate on development. Do you have any opinions?" Everything is done in accordance with the main laws of the Warriors' Palace. Thousands of disciples in the Palace of Life responded, "It is good." The sword nodded a little and turned back and ordered the king of Juzai, "Jujua Supreme, please release all the spaceships in my life shrine inventory and arrange the disciples to board." "Yes." King Jujia nodded and turned to prepare. Tianshuan Supreme. Jian Wushuang continued to look to the God of Heaven. "You are responsible for putting all the books, magic drugs, magic materials, weapons, and source rocks of the universe in the library. Observe." Noble Supreme nodded and turned into a streamer, looting towards the library. Extreme Axe. Sword Wu's eyes turned, and he looked at the Supreme Axe again and sent orders one after another. Suddenly, the entire Shrine of Life began to move quickly. Immediately afterwards, Jian Wushuang stepped forward and came to Wudao River. Healing. Jian Wushuang stood with his hands on his back, stood on Wudaoha, and drank softly. For a while, the dwarf man with a small mustache and a height of less than 3 feet came out of the Wudao River. "Heavenly Sword, no." When he saw Jian Wushuang, he exclaimed, and before he finished speaking, he saw Jian Wushuang's eyes glared, his head stopped, and he smiled, "Wushuang Supreme." "Okay." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. This river spirit should be the only person in the life shrine who still doesn't know his identity and the news that the magical universe has been defeated. "Gather up and leave me with the Temple of Life." "Leave the Temple of Life." He Ling, who was still smirking and charming, suddenly widened his eyes and stared at Jian Wushuang. Then he cried like a cat with a tail on his tail. "Well, you are a sword, eat something out of it, and publish personal revenge. Do you now feel that you are terrible and you want to avenge Master Ben Helling? I tell you, even if I am a deadhead here, even if the Palace of Life is dead, I will not leave. I will live and die with the Palace of Life." In these words, the meaning of righteousness sounded righteous. Jian Wushuang heard the words and immediately laughed, throwing his sleeves and saying, Then you are here to prepare for death." After that, Jian Wushuang was ready to leave. Wu Dao Heling glanced at Jian Wushuang at an oblique angle, snorted coldly, and looked dismissively. "Ah." Just then, Yu read the book www.okanshu, Kame disciple of life shrine who packed his bags, passed from high altitude, saw Wu Daoling, couldn't help but stop, landed from the air, quite unexpectedly. "Master Heling, are you not ready to leave yet?" "Leave? Why should I leave?" Heling yanked her nose, popped a booger, shot it on the ground, and said disdainfully. The life shrine disciple couldn't help but feel even more astonished when he heard the words, and replied, "Master Heling, don't you know that? The magical universe has fallen to the north, and the strong of the virtual universe will soon hit here." After speaking, the disciple stopped saying more. As soon as he stepped on his foot, he walked towards the Shanmen Square. Several of his brothers had boarded the ship, and he could not delay it. What? The divine universe is defeated? The people of the virtual universe are about to attack. Heeling's movement of picking his nose was stalled, and the whole person was stunned. Immediately, he slammed an excitement all over his body, groaning, "Mother!" The next moment, the river spirit plunged into the river of awakening. After a few breaths, the little gnome-like adult, Heeling, carrying a bag resembling a flower pants, rushed out. "Hey, the little guy in front, wait for my master!" He shouted out of breath, "Go to the death and coexistence of Tainyang." After an hour, all preparations are completed. Thousands of disciples on the Shrine of Life have successively boarded the spacecraft. This made the sword unparalleled, a little relieved. In this case, only the last question remains. "Palace, what about Yenshan Supreme?" Bloodwave Supreme stood behind Jian, was body, and whispered, "Yenshan is supreme, and his body has long been transformed into a mountain." Chapter 45, 73. Yenshan Supreme. Jian Wu's eyes looked towards the mountain at the Gate of Life Jingu, and his brows could not help being locked. Yenshan Supreme. His body has long been connected to the entire palace of life, just like a big tree deeply rooted in the ground. The land under his feet is Yenshan Supreme's chest, and the flowing river is Yen, extreme blood of the mountain. He has long been separated from the Shrine of Life. "Palace, don't worry about me." On the huge mountain, the face of Yenshan Supreme emerged. He looked at Jian Wushuang and smiled slightly. "In these years, I can't move, but I've already built a magical power that can hide the breath. As long as I don't actively expose the breath, even if the invincible Supreme comes, I can never see my own body, but only when I am an ordinary mountain. You guys just leave." Jian Wushuang heard a silence for a moment, then nodded. No matter whether Yenshan Supreme said true or false, just to comfort him to say this, he must only take it as true. Today he is no longer full, and the family is not hungry. He must carry the entire life shrine and be responsible for the thousands of lives in the life shrine. Let him be indecisive. After a while, all the disciples boarded the spacecraft, leaving only the 4 chief supreme leaders, including Jian Wushuang and Jiu Jiawang. Alas! At this moment, a dull sound came from the direction of the Tibetan Pavilion of Life Shrine, and the whole earth shuddered. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, turned his head, and saw that Tianzuan Supreme pushed from inside the Tibetan Pavilion and pushed out a huge dragon-like cannon. This dragon cannon is as large as 100 feet. At the muzzle alone, it has the size of a pond towering into the clouds, and the dark cannon body is full of bronzing gods. This is... Jian Wu's eyes narrowed, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He felt a dreadful sense of danger on this faucet. In terms of his current strength, some ordinary, invincible supremes cannot bring him such a sense of danger. Gongju, this is the big killer at the bottom of the pressure chamber of our life shrine. Destroy the dragon artillery. It is a skull made after the death of Zulong. Although it has only one blow, it can kill. Invincible Supreme. Tina Supreme said with a smile. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and replied, there are such big killers. Why didn't they take them out when the 6 major forces invaded the Palace of Life? The Bloodwave Supreme came out and explained, the Palace Master. Although this dragon artillery is enough to instantly kill the Invincible Supreme in an instant, but it has only one blow. At that time, although the situation of the Life Temple was critical, it had not yet reached the gate of destruction to the extent that it is unavoidable to use this thing. With a bitter smile, Supreme Blood continued, well, we can't use this dragon cannon at the time. The dragon cannon must use a special key to start. Key. Jian Wushuang gave a flick. Good. Bloodwave Supreme nodded his head, stretched his fingers toward the sword and sang on his waist, representing the identity of the Palace of Life Jinggong, as a jade-like black iron token, and replied, Master Palace, the key is the Palace of Life Jinggong tokens. The last time the old Palace Master did not return, the Palace Master's token disappeared, and this big killer has been put on hold in the Tibetan pavilion. So it is. Subsequently, Jian Wushuang was informed by the Supreme Master of Blood and used the token of the Palace Master to unlock the dragon cannon and earn it into the Ring of War. At this point, the relocation plan of the Shrine of Life has been completely arranged. Rumble! With the roar of a sound engine, dozens of cosmic boats were suspended in the starry sky, and a roar were issued, and a catapult suddenly flew towards the extreme north direction of the universe. The wind on the deck of the first spacecraft was fierce. Jian Wushuang stood in silent hands, looking back towards the direction of the Temple of Life. With the rapid speed of the spacecraft, the Temple of Life has become smaller and smaller until a small black spot. I will definitely be back, definitely. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated, suddenly turned away, no longer looking at the Temple of Life, but his eyes flashed, looking far ahead. 3 months passed. Within these 3 months, a large group of people and horses in the virtual universe finally killed all of them. They walked all the way, they killed all the way, the whole magical universe. A raging flame of war, sorrowful and wild. In the past, the starry sky, which was originally brilliant, was all stained with blood, begging for mercy. Sorrow, roar, and endless roaring madness become all the melody of this universe. In just 3 months, the large and small gates that have fallen have exceeded hundreds. There are thousands of universes, and the entire race is slaughtered by the virtual universe. There are top forces, enslaved by the virtual universe, turned into puppets without self-consciousness, and left to manipulate. At the same time, countless fierce battles broke out in the universe. There is a kingdom of God the Ants and mortals who descend to the kingdom of God, up to the of the kingdom of God, and the supreme state of God are all dying, and they will fight to the last moment of life. Even if they are the last to fall for a moment, billions of souls across the country were silent, without asking for mercy. They only have one sentence: health, standing health. To die, to die. There are also top forces, the Lord of the Holy Land of one party, who has kept only a trace of tinder and sent the most talented disciples in his sect. He personally led more than 8,000 disciples in the sect. Divine Power Universe, never an ischemic person. In the magical universe, this icy and lonely starry sky, they wrote a series of epics. The space fleet of the Shrine of Life is already getting closer and closer to the far north of the universe and the direction of the 9 restricted areas. In the cabin of the first spacecraft responsible for opening the road, Swordsman, Giant Axe Supreme, Bloodwave Supreme, and others are gathered together to discuss the resettlement. The four of them gathered around a round table, which was developing a map with divine power. Nothing else on the map, only 9 restricted areas. Among the 9 restricted areas, there are already 5 restricted areas, which were crossed by Jian Wushuang and 4 others. The Palace Lord, the Dragon, the Phoenix, and the Unicorns each occupy a large forbidden area, and the Dark Demons and the Hegemon Ancestors also occupy a large forbidden area. In such an emergency, I am afraid that they will not let us in. Therefore, we have only 4 restricted areas to choose from. The blood of the Supreme, I flashed, Shen said. Gumming Cave, Tomb of the Gods, a land of sorrow, Emperor's ruins. And in these 4 places, no one has actually stepped in and out so far. No one knows what the situation is just because it is extremely dangerous. Chapter 45-74. Gumming Cave, Tombs of the Gods, a land of sadness, Emperor's ruins. These 4 places are the 4 restricted areas that no one has yet set foot in. Jian Wushuang frowned, looking at the map of the evolution of divine power, and turned into restricted areas without speaking, but quickly thought about it. He already has a preliminary understanding of these 4 places. The first is Gumming Cave. It is said that the formation of the Gumming Cave was at the beginning of the universe. The Hongmenki was divided into 2. However, this turbid gas was not exhausted. The rest of the turbid gas gathered together and entered the northern region together, forming this ancient Ming Cave. It is rumored that in this ancient Ming Cave, there is a large amount of turbid air reverberating day and night, emitting a huge roar, which is enough to scrape bones and flesh and destroy the soul. Even if it is the invincible Supreme himself, he can't hold on to the incense time in it. Because of this situation, Gu Mingdong, without one living, has always been the most empty forbidden area of the divine universe. Secondly, it is the Tomb of the Gods. Many tombs are buried in the tombs of the gods, and most of these undead came from the beginning of the universe, the Dragon and Phoenix Unicorn calamity, and the follow-up war with the virtual universe and the mighty undead who died in the War of Calamity. Therefore, the tombs of the gods are filled with these terrifying warfare before the power and various emotions such as unwillingness, anger, and sadness. With these emotions, even if it is invincible and supreme, if you spend a long time in it, your mind will be affected and you will become a complete lunatic. After thinking about it, Jian Wushuang erased these 2 forbidden areas. There is no invincible supreme seat in the Shrine of Life today. It is too dangerous to go to these 2 forbidden areas. It can be said that as long as Jian Wushuang dared to bring the life shrine into these 2 forbidden places, almost as long as 10 minutes were not enough, the entire life shrine disciples would be wiped out. The ending of his sword, unparalleled, is just to hold on for a few more breaths. Seeing Jian Wushuang's actions of erasing the 2 forbidden areas, Supreme Bloodwave, Great Axe, etc., nodded secretly. Jian Wushuang's idea almost coincided with them. The Palace Master, then the forbidden land that we can choose is the land of sadness and ancestors. The Bloodwave Supreme, Shen began. Okay, I know. Sword Wushuang nodded his head and turned to look at the last 2 forbidden places on the sand table map. The Sad Land and the Emperor's ancestral site are 2 of the most mysterious forbidden places recognized by divine universe. At that time, 2 invincible supremes chased each other and fled into the Emperor's ancestral site, but the 2 never came out again. If we say that the tombs of the gods and the caves of Gumming, everyone knows 1 or 2 things. In the face of this tragedy and the Emperor's ancestral site, it is a black eye. The only information I knew was that the 2 forbidden grounds were rumored to have been formed long before the universe was chaotic. Chaos is not on. How old is that? Palace, which forbidden area do we choose? Bloodwave Supreme asked. Jian Wushuang heard this for a moment, then shook his head and said, "For us, the situation in these two forbidden places is similar. Once we have reached the extreme north of the universe, take another step and look at it. It can only be so." Blood waved supreme, and others looked at each other and couldn't help looking at each other, all smiling bitterly, thinking of their life shrine. When the magical universe is one of the top forces, when this disaster strikes, they have no resistance, and it is extremely difficult to find a hiding place. Just as everyone was talking, da-da-da, there was a sudden footstep on the deck. Immediately afterwards, I saw a disciple in the Palace of Life, hurriedly walked quickly into the cabin, and said, "Master Gong, Chief Supreme, there is a refugee rowed outside the boat, and he wants help." "Huh, refugees." Jian Wushuang frowned. "Blood wave," Supreme explained by the side. "Palace you do know, and then the universe is killed. Many disciples or elders originally from the big forces are displaced, wandering in the universe. They are refugees." "Is that so?" Jian Wushuang thought for a while and did not rashly order him to accept this group of refugees, but said, "Let's go and see what happens first." After that, Jian Wushuang got up and stood up, walking frostily towards the cabin. The four chief supremacy of Blood Wave, Giant Axe, Nature, and 9 Kings are slightly behind the swords. Walking to the deck of the spacecraft, Jian Wushuang looked up and saw a crowd of people standing in front of the spacecraft. These men were shabby and shaved, showing their embarrassment. The old man, headed by him, had white hair hanging down, covering most of his face, and was covered with blood. At a glance, you can see that these people were just afraid of experiencing a violent killing before they escaped. "My lord, my husband is leaning on the horse. In the past, he was the elder of Tianyuanzong, but please keep it." The old man, headed by the sword, saw Jian Wushuang stepping out of the way and immediately knelt down, holding his head again and again. Behind it, the refugees who came from all corners of the world, gathered because of the fugitives, kneeled and whispered words. "Father, they are so pitiful, so they are taken in." Seeing cold like frost could not help but soften. Jian Wushuang heard no reply, but stared at the oblique horse that claimed to be the elder of Tianyuanzong, and looked at it for nearly 10 seconds before turning his eyes to look at the hundreds of refugees behind him. "Sorry, our cabin is full, and we can't hold so many people." The sword is open without expression on both sides. After that, he turned to return to the cabin. The frost was cold, and she clearly remembered that there were still many places in the cabin, but she always trusted Jian Wushuang, and she didn't say more when she saw the situation. Instead, she took a closer look at the refugees. At this look, she was shocked and saw something strange. The old man, headed by the refugees, saw Jian Wushuang turned and wanted to leave, and his eyes narrowed suddenly, and a touch of fineness appeared in his eyes. Immediately after, he yelled, "Sir, save us! We don't have a cosmic boat. Those in the virtual universe will be killed immediately, and we will all die. I beg you to raise your hand and save us." After he shouted, the refugees behind the old man also cried. The sword has no footsteps. He turned his head again and looked at the refugees, his expressionless expression gradually indifferent. "Press over." Jian Wushuang looked at the refugees coldly and spit out 3 words indifferently. Suddenly, the old man's face changed. The next moment, the sadness on his face was gone, replaced by a sinister one. Chapter 45, 75. Press over. When the words of Jian Wushuang fell, the disciples of life in the palace behind him were startled. "Palace, the palace master. Don't let them board the ship. Just press them over. Isn't it great?" A life shrine disciple said stutteringly. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and ignored him, but stared at the old man headed by the refugee, with a grim expression, with an indifferent expression. Ha ha! And the old man with a sad face laughed, suddenly. Little baby, tell me, how do you tell? The old man slowly stood up. The sadness on his face was gone. Instead, he stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, showing a touch of greed in his eyes. Along with the old man's showdown, the refugees behind him also got up and stood up with a tinge of light on their faces. Leader, don't talk nonsense with this little baby. Kill them all and steal their space battleship. A refugee stood behind the old man and smiled vaguely. Jian Wushuang took a scornful look at the old man and said lightly, "If I'm not mistaken, have you just ransacked others? The blood on your body is all other people, and it's hard not to be seen." "Is that so?" The old man narrowed his eyes, glanced down at the blood on his body, and seemed to remember something. He said, "There was a couple just now. They just needed to trust us, but they just didn't know it. So the old man had to kill her aunt and daughter in front of the man, and then crush the man's body inch by inch. In the end, the man couldn't bear it and died." At this point, the old man raised his head and looked around Jian Wushuang and Lung Rushwang's face next to him, revealing a trace of obscenity, and said hushingly, "Little doll, presumably you are a smart person. Wouldn't you be so uninteresting?" As soon as the words fell, he hadn't waited for the sword, Wushuang, to move. The cold frost beside him was already furious, and the long whip in his hand appeared out of nowhere, blasting the void directly, spreading for thousands of miles, and be heading towards the old man. "Ha ha, you little girl, it's hot." The old man laughed loudly, soaring into the sky, revealing repairs. A half-step invincible and supreme momentum spread. Suddenly, with just one flick of his finger, he flew off the frosty long whip. Half-step invincible supreme. Suddenly, the blood of Supreme and other people sank. You should know that with the fall of the Gava Supreme, the cultivation of the entire palace of life is the highest, but it is only the breakthrough of the bloodstream supreme. But the Bloodwave Supreme only stepped into the half-step invincible supreme, and this old man, looking at his strong breath, is like a prison in the deep, apparently already an old-fashioned, half-step invincible supreme. "Lord, let me do it." Bloodwave Supreme took a deep breath, his expression dignified. "No need." Jian Wushuang shook his head, squinted at the old man, and spit out two words indifferently, "Brute." Immediately, Jian Wushuang stepped into a sword light and killed the old man. Miles of clouds have been cut. Between heaven and earth, there is only one line left. Oh! Feeling this biting sword, the old man was shocked at first, then immediately dismissed. "Medium and supreme, dare to arrogant in front of me? The palace master is careful." Blood Sovereign saw Jian Wushuang rush to the past, and his heart was equally shocked. Sword warriors have separated the divine power from the universe for thousands of years. The impression of Bloodwave Supreme on sword warriors staying is still the elementary state of supremacy, and its strength is at the highest level. Today, Jian Wushuang, although breaking through the medium supreme, but want to come a half-step invincible supreme, still far behind. Even the coldness was frosty, and the heart was clenched fiercely. The sword is unparalleled, leaving the magical universe for too long. Many people have long forgotten his combat power. In the audience, only the king of Jie looked indifferent, and he was not worried about Jian Wushuang at all. He knows the sword unparalleled combat power. Today's sword unparalleled cannot match the invincible supremacy because it has not been tried, but looking at the world, no one exists under the invincible supreme, can support 10 moves. Even the most powerful of the 5-marked virtual honor of the virtual universe, the fucking, was beheaded by the sword unparalleled 10 strokes. What is this old man? Ha ha ha, Junior. If you don't know anything, just blame the old man. The old man laughed wildly, and before he finished speaking, the laughter came to an abrupt end. A skull broke away from his neck, and flew high. Immediately afterwards, his body was broken like a mirror that fell to the ground fiercely. How can you? The face of the old man's skull surged to the extreme, and looked at Jian Wushuang in horror. My lord, the younger ones don't know Tarzan. They don't know the real person. You have a lot of adults. Raise your expensive hands, and let the little ones. He frantically begs for mercy, hoeing like garlic. Noise. The sword Wushuang proudly stands in the void, flicks his fingers, and instantly a sword shoots out from his fingertips, piercing it. Boom. The next moment, the old man's head shattered like a cracked watermelon, and he could not die anymore. Seeing this scene, the desire to rush out of the blood wave is supreme, the action is stagnant, and a flash of dullness flashes in both eyes. And those refugees who followed this old man saw that they had died for a while. Soon. Oh! The refugees screamed and fled. Jian Wushuang patted his right hand gently to his waist, and suddenly the sword of Tai Luo came out of the sheath instantly, like the same white dragon was shocked. He rushed up and killed them one by one. After a while, the Taro sword was automatically sheathed and fell into the Taro sword sheath. The sword has no twin body shape and has returned to the deck of the space boat from the void space. Blood waved supreme, then slammed a shock response, grabbed the arm of Jian Wushuang, and never had a disorientation asking, Palace, do you have the same combat power as the Invincible Supreme? I don't know. I guess it can be a battle. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. This is not his arrogance, but confidence. Today's sword unparalleled, not only broke through the Middle Supreme, the cultivation is skyrocketing, and then sealed the land of the gods, but also received all the spiritual insights given by the main Tao of the Supreme Palace of Life Shrine. He refined this insight every day. His strength almost doubled with the day. The water rose. The reason for his uncertainty is that he has not yet had a chance to truly fight the Invincible Supreme. Patriarch ancestors and the supreme ones among the supreme lords, such as the Supreme Master, the sword unparalleled for the time being. The gap is very large, but the weak Invincible Supremes, such as the Black Master Supreme, the Master of the Diwu Temple, the sword unparalleled is really confident and can match it. World War I. Okay, let's go. After a moment, Jian Wushuang returned to the cabin. The entire fleet of the Life Shrine continued to sail, leaving a place after a shuttle. In the endless starry sky, they are getting closer and closer towards the far north where the 9 restricted areas are located. Chapter 45-76. After 3 months, the space fleet of the Temple of Life gradually broke away from the bustling and came to the far north of the universe. The temperature plummeted at the cliff-like speed, and a thick layer of frost was deposited on the entire deck of the spacecraft. In front of it is a cold and lonely starry sky. 9 galaxy-like galaxies hover quietly in front of it, exuding an icy cold. Of the 9 restricted areas, the 3 dragons, and unicorns already accounted for 3 of them, plus the tyrants of the tyrants, and the descendants of the dark demons occupied 2, leaving only 4 restricted areas. Gumming Cave and the tombs of the gods have long been eliminated by Jian Wushuang in their expectations. Therefore, there are only 2 choices, the Emperor's ancestral site and the Sad Land. Jian Wushuang looked at the 2 restricted areas, his eyes flashed, and he began to think carefully. These 2 forbidden grounds were formed before the universe was opened, and no one can know what is inside them. Therefore, the degree of danger does not make any difference to Jian Wushuang. Palace, I think it would be better for us to go to the Emperor's site. Bloodwave, Supreme set aside. Oh, why? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrow and asked. Bloodwave Supreme heard a smile, shook his head, and replied, I don't know. There is a sense of intuition in it. It feels like this Emperor's ancestral site seems to have an opportunity to make a difference. Well, Then go to the emperor's sight. Jian Wushuang heard the words for a moment, then said dumbly. The spacecraft made a roar and headed towards the emperor's ancestral site. Just when the spacecraft was about to reach the entrance of the galaxy leading to the ruins of the emperor's ancestors, an ordinary disciple in the universe of the Life Shrine fleet suddenly fell to the ground with a stunned noise. His stomach turned up, and his mouth vomited. Vomit! Puff! Suddenly, countless pieces of flesh and blood were spit out from the disciple's mouth, including a finger-sized black corpse. Brother Makino, what's wrong with you? What is this? Suddenly, many disciples next to this disciple were startled, looked at him. There was a turmoil. Now about to enter the emperor's ancestral site, all the disciples are tense, holding their breath and being tense. The sudden vision suddenly panicked them. What's wrong? Jian Wushuang frowned and looked back. I saw that the corpse jumped on the deck and suddenly turned into a black rush, piercing the galaxy where the emperor's site was located. The 9 forbidden areas are all small worlds developed independently, and the entrance to the passage is the center of the galaxy. At the moment, in the center of the galaxy, at the site of the emperor's ancestor, a back wearing a black suit stood with his hand on his back, stepping on a meteorite, hunting in his clothes. The whole man was full of indifference. Call out. The corpse fell on the shoulder of the black back, and then slid into the body along the gap of the collar. Jian Wushuang watched this scene. His brows gradually frowned. This back gives him a familiar feeling. Next moment, the back of the black man turned slowly. His gaze looked at Jian Wushuang, and he spit out 2 words without expression. Missed double. As the voice fell, the back of the black man's face also emerged from the shadow. This person, he is the emperor of the refining gods, 8 desolate lords. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's heart sank and his pupils shrank. How did this person appear here? I saw Ba Huangshu staring at Jian Wushuang indifferently and said, Fog Shuang, I will be here, didn't think of it. As early as you're 1, disguised as the Red Whale Gang leader, mixed into the 87th place. When there was a crack, the seat was faintly aware of it. After the war began, the seat finally confirmed that it was you. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and did not answer. To this day, he can already guess that the reason why the 8 deserted emperors appeared here must be when the war began. The 8 deserted emperors secretly put down a corpse and followed him while he was not paying attention. Track. What's wrong? Who is this person? Behind the sword Wushuang, there was a shock. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and pressed it down, signaling the disciples of the Palace of Life to be quiet, immediately raised his head, stared directly at Ba Huangshuozen, and said calmly, Yabaraki, what do you want now? What do I want? Ba Huangshuozen heard a cold snorting sound, a sudden anger on his face. Angrily, Miss Shuang, this seat thinks that you are not thin. You killed the elders and sons of God Scythe. This seat has not been held accountable. This seat has also personally sent you to the position of the Lord of the Refining God, making you a pinnacle of peaks, which should be for you. This seat has a lot of it all given to you, but how did you cultivate Shinzong to me? Do you still remember Elder Moose Wind? How did he treat you in the first place? He did everything to protect you in front of this seat. I refined Shinzong, who has treated you badly. How about you set the whole refining gods and disregard, betray the empty universe? This seat asks you, can you feel a bit of guilt? In the end, the sound of Ba Huangshuozen sounded like a thunder, banging, deafening. Jian Wushuang heard a word of silence for a second or two, and after a short while, took a deep breath and replied, Sorry. The Lord of the Refining God heard a cold, snorting sound. His eyes flickered, and he replied, Miss Shuang, now that the divine power universe has been defeated, and there is no possibility of a comeback, this seat will finally give you a chance. As long as you cast away the dark and cast the light and kill all the people behind you, You will forgive you for all the previous actions. You are still my new lord of refining the sect. How about it?" As soon as this remark came to an end, the master of the refining stared at Jian Wushuang as closely as possible, as long as Jian Wushuang dared to say the word rejected. He immediately started his hands. Jian Wushuang heard the words expressionless, and slowly held the hilt of the Tai Luo divine sword. 8 shortages, it's useless to say more, 1 battle. This remark already represents the answer of Jian Wushuang. Stubbornly stupid. Ba Huang Xuanzuan snorted coldly, and a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes. "Miss Shuang, then you will be buried with divine universe." Boom! Suddenly, Ba Huang Xuanzuan stepped on his feet, and the meteorite at the bottom of the foot shattered instantly, and his whole person has turned into a streamer, bursting towards the sword, unparalleled. The momentum of the 6-mark vanity was released all the way, just like the raging sea and the smashing waves. Extreme blood, I stopped him, and you brought the disciples of life to the tragedy. Jian Wu's eyes narrowed, and he pulled the sword out of the sheath. After saying this, Jian Wushuang directly turned into a practicing swordman that runs through the world, and killed towards the 8 desolate deities. 8 wastelands, 6 marks, and the divine universe are invincible supreme. This is the sword incomparable, the first time invincible to the enemy. Fu Jun, seeing cold like frost, his face suddenly changed, and he wanted to rush out. Alas! A big hand caught the frosty cuff. The blood wave's supreme expression was dignified, and he shook his head. "Mrs. Palace, we can't intervene in this battle. Staying here will only drag the palace. Listen to the palace. Let's go to the land of tragedy." The voice dropped, and Bloodwave Supreme directly manipulated the spacecraft, turned the bow, and a roar shot toward the sad and sorrowful land next to the Emperor's ancestral site. Chapter 45-77. The 2 men, Jian Wushuang and Ba Huang Xuanzuan, were like 2 meteorites burning with flames, and they hit each other fiercely. A violent explosion came out, and then a figure was seen flying backwards, drawing a long straight line in the void, and pulling out a long gully. The person who flew upside down is Jian Wushuang. Is this the power of Invincible Supreme? The sword of Wu Jianshuang was overflowing with golden blood, and the mouth of the tiger was trembling with anger and blood. I have to say that the power of the Invincible Supreme is far beyond the ordinary Supreme. Even if it is just a hit, it is not comparable to the ordinary Supreme. Today's sword is unparalleled. It can be said that it is not exaggerated to be the Invincible Supreme, but he is just not an adversary in the face of a random blow from the 8 desolates. Want to escape? The 8th desolation hummed coldly, looking at the fleet of life, shrine rushing towards the sorrowful cave, and a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes. Although he didn't know what was in the land of sadness, the keen intuition from the 6-mark vanity told him that if he let this group of people escape from the land of sadness, he was afraid that he would no longer be able to slay him and had to sit. Wax. Go with. He waved his right hand, and suddenly in the void behind him, a tall corpse with a pale face and eyes like rotting grapes came out from behind him. This corpse is also a 6-mark corpse. Suddenly, the corpse stepped on, and suddenly pulled out a residual image in the void, rushing towards the Life Shrine space fleet that was less than 100 feet away from the entrance of the path of tragedy. Wu Jian saw this, and suddenly his eyes narrowed, and a star-splitting chopped it out, blocking the pace of the corpse. Immediately afterwards, located in the void behind Jian Wushuang, Tai Luo's corpse took the same step, and with a flash of his body, he had already hit the 6-marked corpse fiercely. The high supreme breath emanates from the body of Taro God. During this period of time, Jian Wushuang not only digested the spiritual insights given to him by the digestive tract daily, improved his strength, but also did not lose his possession of Tai Luo's corpse. Wu Tailuo's corpse is the top supreme practice. At this moment, there is no hindrance to recovery. Unexpectedly, he has reached the state of supreme. I saw Tai Luo's corpse turned into a sword, and the sword went away. The wind and thunder rolled directly and hit the six-marked corpse directly, leaving a thick nail mark on the surface of his body. Before the death of the Supreme Master Tai Luo, he could use the top master to repair the invincible Supreme. Although it is only a corpse at this moment, with the fighting instinct, it is enough to resist the corpses of the 8 desolate lords. For Jian Wushuang, this is enough. I saw that this 6-marked corpse was blocked by Tai Luo's corpse for a moment. The space warship of the Temple of Life had shuttled fiercely into the entrance to the path of tragedy. Jian Wushuang saw this, and finally felt relieved. Now he can let go of the battle. Jack, the stunned and desolate emperor, seeing this scene, his face suddenly became iron blue. How can he not recognize? This corpse that Jian Wushuang just sent out is just the corpse that Jian Wushuang obtained at the time of refining the coffin of God's sect. Miss Pear, The cold mang flickered in the eyes of Su Bahuang Suzun, and he shot with both hands. A large amount of virtual force gathered in his hands and turned into 2 dark of light, slamming towards the sword, unparalleled. Good job! Jian Wushuang's big sleeve flung, without any fear in his eyes, but the war intentions surging to the extreme. At the position of his eyebrow, a purple Sichuan word appeared faintly, like blood dripping. His eyes turned into the bright color of pale gold, his blood rolled, his muffled sound like a hammer. This is an anomaly that spawns chaos overlord to the extreme. Battle! The word was spit out by Jian Wushuang's open mouth. In the next moment, the whole person has been transformed into a dawning swordmang, turning heaven and earth into a line, and instantly beheaded towards the 8 desolate emperors. Carved insect tricks. Wu Bahuang Suzun hummed with an expressionless expression and flew up to meet him, fighting with Jian Wushuang. Huh! One after another the roar came from the encounter between the two, as if 2 wild beasts were fighting. Open the sky! Cut star! Yong Yi! Breaking dawn! One after another. The sword masters that had made Jian Wushuang slay countless enemies, cast out from the hands of Jian Wushuang. However, it is useless. Everything is useless. Su Bahuang Suzun's hands surging forcelessly, as if holding 2 thunders in his hand, directly destroying them, crushing them as much as possible. In the blink of an eye, the 2 fought over 100 moves. Is this the power of Invincible Supreme? He was slammed back and forth by 1 palm, and Jian Wushuang, who had cracks on his body, uttered a marvel in his mouth. A trace. He is far from the ultimate state of invincibility, and there is always a gap, this seemingly small gap, but in fact it is like of nature, is a gap that he can never cross in a short time. However, Jian Wushuang was astonished in his heart, but he didn't know how much stormy sea surged in his heart at the moment. According to the conversion of the realm of the virtual universe, Jian Wushuang's cultivation is now a realm, but it is only a 2-mark virtual honor, and he is a 6-mark virtual honor, standing at the peak of the entire universe. Although in the confrontation just now, Bahuang Xuanzun did not use those earth-shattering killing moves, but the power of the shot was enough to kill all the Xuanzun below the level of 6 marks. However, Jian Wushuang, although suppressed by him, how can there be a slight danger of life and death? Howling! If this sun does not kill, it will become a confidant of the virtual universe in the future. Thought of this, there is a sense of killing in the eyes of Bahuang Xuanzun, and he no longer intends to keep his hand, but wants to set his sword directly to death. Miss Shuang, let's die. This seat has given you the opportunity to choose another camp, but you don't cherish it. You must blame this seat for being ruthless. Heba Huang Suzun spoke coldly, and in his hands, a small whirlpool appeared suddenly, and endless virtual power began to condense. A smashing force of destruction destroyed the atmosphere, crushing the eternal void. And Jian Wushuang has already directly cast his biggest killing move before then. Taro Sword Code, 5th style, Taro. Boom! In an instant, the sky sword rushed into the sky, shook the world, and broke through the clouds. The figure of the sword goddess of Qi Qing shirt appeared behind the sword Wushuang, and with the sword Wushuang waving his sword, he cut off the mighty swordman with a wide width. This sword has never been disadvantaged, and cut off all enemies in the world. This sword has been destroyed, and has never been defeated. After the sword was cut out, Sword saw both without looking at the results, and the divine power broke out on both legs, and he quickly swept away towards the entrance of the path of tragedy. With this sword, he never imagined that he could slay the 8 wastelands, which is not what he can currently do. With this sword, he only needs to let Bahuang Shuzuan have no time to take care of him, enough to make him step into the path of tragedy. Chapter 4578. Miss Double. Seeing Jian Wushuang blasting towards the entrance to the path of sadness and sorrow, Bahuang Zuzan's face was instantly furious. As soon as he wanted to get up and chase, he saw the Taro swordsman that Jian Wushuang had used his best efforts to hack, and slashed at him. That sharp sword, even if it is him, dare not belittle it. Damn! Heba Huang Suzun's face sank, and he had to stop and move his whole body power to resist this sword. Virtual art, Big Ghost's hand. Su Ba Wang sighed coldly, and saw his hands suddenly turn black. His nails skyrocketed, became sharp, and the body of corpse was exuded like smoke. Say to this seat, Yahuang Shuzuan sighed coldly, and then suddenly pushed forward with his hands, grabbed the magnificent Tai Luo Jianmeng. Huh! I saw countless sparks splashing at the junction of Yahuang Shuzuan and this sword. I was like a man with steel gloves, a steel gear that was moving at a high speed, and the figure of 8 desolation, backed by the sword, and his legs crossed a long mark in the void. This sword. Su Ba Wang's face was extremely furious. The last form of Tai Luo Jiandian was cut by Jian Wushuang. Although it could not bring him a deadly threat, it actually gave him a feeling like acupuncture. This is impossible for the Supreme to the Invincible Supreme. Say to this seat, after I was pushed back by 100 feet by this sword, Bahuang Shuzuan stared at his eyes with a roar, and the black mang in his hands suddenly became a masterpiece. Next moment, this sword was directly tortured by Bahuang Shuzuan. After Sun shattered the sword, Bahuang Shuzuan gasped slightly, and a few beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Then he lowered his head and looked into the palms of his hands, only to see that in his palm position, a wound with deep bones was cut and blood dripped. Miss Double. The 8th desolation frowns and winces, one step to the entrance to the land of sorrow. Let's take a look at this seat. Can you run? Lung snorted, and Bahuang Shuanzuan let out a false sense, spreading towards this sad and humble place. Only 3 breaths. Huh. Su Bahuang Suzun is like being hit by a heavy hammer. The whole person bends down and spit out a spit of blood, and his face becomes waxy yellow instantly. Big land. He looked up at this sad place. His eyes flashed with fear. Just now he explored this sad place with false knowledge, just as if he had touched an unspeakable existence. In an instant, he broke up all his false knowledge. If he hadn't responded fast enough to cut off his falsehood in time, I'm afraid that the unbelievable power has spread to him along with the falsehood and destroyed him together. Miss Shuang, you have entered this terrible land. You are seeking your own way of death. He shook his head, and Ba Huangsan's complexion glanced towards this sad and hungry place, and immediately he stepped into a stream of light and quickly left here. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang and the people of the Temple of Life have entered this land of sorrow and have no doubt died. I don't need to continue smashing here to waste time. In the Wailing Land, Wu Jianwushu retracted the corpse of Tai Luo, stepped on it, and quickly rushed forward. This is a long passage, dark into the eyes. Even if Jian Wushuang used the medium and supreme cultivation to look forward, he still felt the darkness and visibility no more than 10 meters. Alas, Wu Jian Wushuang did not dare to release his consciousness at will, but kept flying forward. He could feel the cold walls on both sides of this long passage. The walls seemed to be engraved with something. Out of prudence, Jian Wushuang did not touch it randomly, but shot continuously forward. After the time of Wuxiangxiang, Jian Wushuang saw a light of ignition not far away. That is, the flame of the engine burning when the spacecraft was traveling. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang stepped up and caught up with the spacecraft, one step, followed by several steps, and landed on the deck of the first spacecraft. Palace Lord, seeing Jian Wushuang return, the blood wave is supreme, cold as frost, etc., and immediately frowned. Father, are you okay? Cold as frost held the sword's palm and asked with some concern. I'm fine, but have you encountered any danger along the way? Qi Jian Wushuang smiled and shaved the bridge of the cold frosty nose and said, I heard that Jian Wushuang said it was okay, and everyone was relieved. The 8 desolate deities are divided according to the realm of the divine universe, but the invincible supreme exists. Nothing happened to us. We have been advancing in this channel, but it is strange to say that, at our speed, at least 3 or 4 galaxies have passed through, but they are still in this channel. Nodded coldly and replied. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and frowned. Sure, this passage is a bit weird. Palace Lord, we are not in the divine universe now. Each forbidden area is a small world opened up separately, so we cannot use the regular time to calculate the distance. Sun Xuebu said with a smile. Although he is inferior to Jian Wushuang in terms of combat power and cultivation, but the storms that he has experienced for so many years have made him more knowledgeable in academic experience than Jian Wushuang. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, nodded immediately, and no longer thought deeply, and said, Go on. Yes. The space fleet at the Shrine of Life once again moved forward steadily. However, this journey is 3 days and nights. With the speed of the cosmic boat, even hundreds of star fields have also crossed, but at this moment are still in this dim channel. This time, even the supreme blood frowned, faintly aware that something was wrong. However, in this place of sadness and honor, no one dares to act lightly, but has to wait for the mood in his heart and wait quietly to completely reach the place of sadness and honor. For a long time, it was continuously stretched. On the deck, Yu reading books www. Okanshu, calm, cold, and frosty, and leaning on the sword's shoulders, let the dark wind in this passage constantly blow on the cheeks of the two. Fujun, now the magical universe will be all over sooner or later. What do you say, Qing? What will the gods do in the beginning? Cold and Frosty said, a bit lost. During the passage of this passage, they also seldom fell into peace. Being sullen and calm often makes people think a lot. This made Long Rushuang think a lot, such as the children of the two, such as those who stayed in the early world of the gods. It's okay. In the early days, the terrain of the divine realm was remote, and the war will not spread there for a while. The first step of the virtual universe will only conquer the top forces. Wu Jianshou said with relief, touching his frosty hair. Besides, for my husband, I have informed them of the situation of the divine universe through the avatar I stayed in the early days of the divine realm and wanted to come up with their own solutions. Okay, Frosty nodded softly. As the two kept chatting, suddenly there was a weird and low laughter in this extremely dark and narrow channel. This low laughter is like someone behind, silently approaching from the darkness, laughing in your ears. Instantly, Jian Wushuang's face changed, Hanmao exploded, and looked back violently. Chapter 45, 79. Who? Wu Jian Wushuang turned back sharply and looked behind him. I saw the dark deck behind him, and in my eyes was empty. Father, what's wrong with you? Cold and Frosty holding Jian Wushuang's hand, he couldn't help asking a question. Jian Wushuang did not reply, but frowned tightly. Just now, he heard a weird low laugh behind his ears. But when he looked back, he saw nothing. Shuanger, did you hear laughter just now? Wu Jianshou took a deep breath and asked Lung Rushuang, laughter? Cold and Frosty, he could not help but hesitated, then shook his head and said, No. Husband, have you been too nervous lately? Is it? Wu Jianshuang frowned, and then looked around again and found nothing abnormal. Could you really have heard it wrong? Maybe it is. Wu Jianshou smiled bitterly and sighed slightly. Recently, he is really under pressure. Well, let's go into the cabin. This channel is just a little weird. I thought for a while. Jian Wushuang proposed. It is good. Frosty nodded. Giggle, giggle. Jian Wushuang, holding Cold as Frost, about to turn his head and approach the cabin. That spooky and weird low laughter sounded again in Jian's ears, like a ghost whispering in his ears. This time, Jian Wushuang heard clearly. Pretend to be a ghost. Jian's eyes were cold. With his strong sense nowadays, one mistake may be because the mind is too tight, but it is impossible to hear wrong for the second time. Next moment, got eyes open, countless blood surges and gathers into Jian Wushuang's eyes. In a short time, the sword of Wushan surged 3 inches in his eyes, and the purple chuan mark appeared on the center of his eyebrow, as if the flame was beating. His expression was blank, and his eyes swept away. However, the result disappointed him. I still see nothing. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's face could not help but swell and gradually drew up, holding his left hand as cold as frost, and his right hand quietly holding the hilt of the sword of Tai Luo. Feeling the warmth from the hilt of the Tai Luo divine sword, Jian Wushuang's heart was slightly at ease. He stared tightly forward without notice. Scratching in the dark behind him, a pair of wrinkled, dry-skinned hands stretched out silently, tremblingly patted on his shoulder. Hiss! For a moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were frozen, and he turned his head to look instantly. I saw behind him, pale cold as frost looking at him with a smile. Shuanger! Wu Jian's brows frowned. Wasn't it cold as frost beside him? No. Wu Jianshou looked back fiercely and saw Lung Rushuang looking in horror at the cold, cold frost that appeared behind the two. Two as cold as frost. Are you looking for me? Cold as Frost looked at Jian Wushuang with a smirk, and the corners of his mouth slowly opened. Grind until the entire mouth reached the back of the ear, exposing a mouth. She reached out her hand and yanked it towards Jian Wushuang's eyes. Look for death. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were cold. His right hand had been holding the tailored Excalibur with the hilt of the sword, and it instantly emerged from the sheath, turning into a stunning white rainbow, fiercely chopping forward. I haven't waited for this sword to split. I saw Cold as Frost like a melting candle, eyes, nose, and mouth began to melt quickly, and after just a few breaths, it turned into a thick pool of white liquid on the ground. Giggle! Giggle! The weird sound of crying and laughing gradually disappeared. After a short while, the deck of the spacecraft once again turned into a group of dead silence. Wu Jianwushu retracted the Taro Excalibur with a frown. Is NT weird, even before he really enters the land of tragedy. "Father, what is that?" Frozen as frost asked. "I don't know. It may be caused by the grudges in this sad place." Wu Jianshou shook his head and said, crackling. At this moment, the cabin door was opened, and Bloodwave Supreme stepped forward hurriedly. "Palace, something happened." Bloodwave Supreme expression was heavy. "What happened?" Wu Jian's eyelids jumped. "Gongzhu, you'll know when you follow." After finishing speaking, Xuanbo Supreme took the sword unparalleled and walked towards the cabin where the Disciples of Life shrine rested. A moment later, Sword Wushuang arrived in the cabin. I saw a bed on which a Disciple of Life shrine was lying with the giant axe, the Heavenly Supreme, the 9 kings, and other people standing next to them, all of whom had an ugly face. "Palace Lord, Palace Lord." Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, Giant Axe and others turned back. Wu Jianwushuang nodded toward them as a response, without any nonsense, walked directly towards this disciple. I saw the 5th series master of this life shrine disciple dominated the repair. At this moment, he was tightly bound to the bed by the blood strength blood binding technique. The disciple has dilated pupils, his face is gray, and the expression on his face is strange. "Giggle, giggle." He didn't open his mouth, but there was a sound of crying and laughing coming from his throat. And he was stupid. He didn't notice it at all, but he kept his eyes open. "It's this laugh again." Wu Jianshuang's face became ugly, and a bad premonition surged in his heart. "Let me see." Su took a deep breath, and Jian Wushuang strode forward. "Photo." He stretched out his fingers, and Jian Wushuang nodded on the disciple's brows. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to release his divine power and probed his body. Sun originally was like a dead body. A stupid-looking disciple suddenly reached out his hand, grabbed Sword's wrist. "You came? Come quickly. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Giggle, giggle. Weird cries and laughter from the disciple's throat. Immediately after that, the scene that Jian Wushuang met on the deck again. I saw the body of this disciple, like a fast-burning candle, starting from the hair and melting little by little into a thick pool of white foam. Damn! Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy to the extreme. Weird. Too weird. He thought that the place of tragedy would be very dangerous, and he was even prepared to let go of the war, even if he died. But he did not expect that this sad place would be so weird. Visible danger, no matter how strong it is not terrible. There is always a way to cope. However, the strange phenomenon that appeared in the place of sadness and misery was invisible and intangible, and there were no traces to be found. The unknown is always the hardest to deal with. What about other disciples? Is there anything unusual? Qi Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked at Bloodwave Supreme and others and said that his face was not very good. Sun Xuebo Supreme and others also did not look very good. A disciple of the Life Shrine died, so openly in front of them, but they said nothing, not even a trace could be captured. Chapter 45-80, in the passage of the quiet and sad place, dozens of spacecraft are marching quietly. I was swallowed by the roar of the engine in this immense absolute darkness. Return to the Lord of the Palace. Other disciples have not found any abnormalities. Bloodwave Supreme replied slightly. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head and was about to get the attention of Bloodwave Supreme. What? A terrifying scream screamed, and the space fleet behind him suddenly blew, screaming in this dark and silent passage. It seemed to be so extreme. Wu Jianshuang's face changed instantly, his body flickered, and he swept directly towards the spacecraft behind him. Sun Xuebo Supreme and others looked at each other. Their faces were ugly, and they quickly followed. A moment later, in the cabin of the ninth spacecraft, Jian Wushuang saw the female disciple who was screaming. I saw the female disciple trembling, her shoulders trembling, her face pale, and she stretched her fingers toward the glass window of the space capsule, her voice terrified. "Palace! Lord! Someone outside!" "Someone—" Jian Wushuang stared, but it was dark outside the glass. This made Jian Wushuang's face gloomy. "You tell me just now," Wu Jian said without expression on both sides. "It is good." The female disciple flashed a flash of memory on her face and began to narrate. Things are simple. Not long ago, this female disciple, originally called Su Yang, was practicing cross-kneeling in the cabin. When she was practicing, she encountered a bottleneck and thought of asking her disciples who were higher than her and giving directions. Subconsciously, she glanced into the glass window next to her. It turned out to be such a look. She instantly saw a scene that would make her unforgettable. I saw on the glass window a face with a blushing face, affixed to the window, eyes hanging like rotten grapes, staring at her. Because the face is too close, the whole facial features become distorted and terrible. It was also the sudden appearance of the face that scared her into a slump and fell to the ground, screaming. After this female disciple finished speaking, her face still looked astonished. I know. Wu Jianshuang's face is not very good-looking. Ghosts they are not ordinary mortals. They are supreme gods standing on the top of this universe. The goblin demon monsters, in their eyes, are simply the ants among the ants. Master of Wushuang Palace, come over here. I have something to tell you. At this moment, Lon Lon, who had been silent, suddenly appeared. Okay. Wu Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and followed Lon Lon out of the cabin. The two went to the deck, and Jian Wushuo stood with his hands up and said, "Girl Lon Lon, you can say anything." Lon Lon nodded and did not continue to speak, but looked away, as if reminiscing about something. After a while, his expression gradually became dignified and said, "Jian Wushuang, you know what our universe was before it was born? What does it look like?" Wu Jianshuang heard a word and said that he had never really understood the matter before the universe was opened up. But here the details. Wu Jianwushuang reached out and made a pleased gesture. "My master once suspected that our universe is just a cycle." "Reincarnation." Jian's brows frowned. "Yes." Tong Lon Lon exhaled deeply and said, "It is reincarnation. According to my master's conjecture, before our universe civilization was born, other civilizations may have been born in this universe. He is just this civilization. For some reason, it was destroyed after all, and the universe returned to chaos. Once again, after a long time, the universe has restarted, giving birth to new life and giving birth to a new civilization. He is our civilization now." Jian Wushuang frowned when he heard the words. Everything Lon Lon said was not impossible. He believes that the speculation of God of the earth is not groundless. My master once came to explore these two forbidden places. Unfortunately, my master kept silent about this experience, and only occasionally I mentioned it inadvertently. According to my master, the emperor's ancestors seemed to bury an extremely powerful corpse that he could not even see through. The age of this corpse is even older than our universe. This sad place, according to the occasional mention of the master, seems to be the last place to fall in the last universe. Jian Wushuang, if this place of tragedy is really like my master said, this is the place where the last universe era fell. Then there must be countless characters from the last universe era, and they are buried here together. Lon Lon has not finished speaking. Suddenly, in this quiet passage, a strange song came out. God is dead. The devil is gone. Everything is in the dust and nothingness. Fu Sangtian, weep alone. Singing like this, it seems that there are countless gods crying, distant, faint, with a bit of... Suddenly, Jian Wushuang looked up sharply. However, he hadn't waited for Jian Wushuang to run his divine power to see what happened. Suddenly grief came from his heart, and a sorrowful meaning rose in his heart. That is a sorrow of vicissitudes of life, a despair of all kinds of despair, a sadness of loneliness and solitude. Wu Mingming only sang, but under this sadness, Jian Wushuang couldn't bear a sore nose for a while. Crackling. That was the sound of water dripping on the deck. Yu Kanshu www. Okanshu. Calm Chi Jian Wushuang looked at her and saw Lan Lan staring blankly at the starry sky, not knowing when she was already in tears. Girl Lan Lan. Chi Jian Wushuang forcibly suppressed the sadness in his heart to destroy him and tried to call Lan Lan. However, Lan Lan was as if stagnant, not even aware of it. Faintly, Jian Wushuang felt a wet face on his face, and he reached out his hand, only to find that his face was also covered with tears. He could feel the sadness as if he had turned into a pair of big hands, holding him tightly around his neck and dragging him into a place of no end. Pretend to be a ghost. Wu Jianshou bit his tongue tightly, and for a while the pain came from the tip of his tongue, making him slightly awake. Howling to endure this discomfort, the sword unparalleled stepped into the cabin. I saw the blood in the cabin of the Supreme, the great axe, the King of Nine Calamity, and so on, or an ordinary disciple, including Cold as Frost, all looked like a devil, and stood in the cabin dull. Damn! Chi Jian Wushuang clenched his fists, and then he could no longer resist the sorrow. His eyes were black, as if falling into an endless abyss. In the narrow, long, and quiet path of the sorrowful land, a dead silence was restored again, leaving only the song that was crying like a demon, but also like a low laugh ringing back and forth, strange and eerie. Chapter 45, 81. The mist mixed with black-gray silk threads was scattered on Jian Wushuang's face with the wind. His intangible but qualitative feeling made him realize his current situation. Yokohama's cosmic boat, traveling through the stars, disappeared, and all the disciples in the Temple of Life disappeared. Sun's intense uneasiness prompted Jian Wushuang to open his eyes, and the eyes were extremely dark with the raging wind. It seems that the extremely dark shadows that existed in ancient times obscured everything. Even if the sword master Wu Shou displayed his magical power, he could only see the area that is a few feet away. Where is this place? Have I come to the land of tragedy? Jian Wushuang murmured softly, but he remembered that he was in the cosmic boat just now, but he was in this strange world at the moment. After thinking for a moment, he held up a pile of sand on the ground with his hands, and he saw through the golden eyes that the sand was not black, but a rough white substance covering a layer of golden halo. Omam! The long and twilight-like sound of the bell in the morning passed through the distant past, coming from a distant past. In this strange environment, Jian Wushuang was horrified. He quickly lowered his figure and looked at the chaotic distance. The next moment, the extreme darkness of chaos slowly rose, and rose like a clear air. At the same time, with the extreme darkness fading, there were nearly 100 big suns rising at the same time. Even in this scene, even the sword, unparalleled sword-making of the kingdom of God, is secretly shocked. Nothing else, just because this scene is too shocking. At this moment, these slowly rising big days are far more than 100 times larger than the big days in any part of the universe. At the same time, these big days are no longer pure, but they emit purple-red giant mansions. Each side of the world has been dyed into a scary purple-red color by these nearly 100 rounds of big sun. With the extremely dark retreat, The long bells of the morning bell and twilight became more frequent and began to sound like war drums. The sadness of weeping like a cry is even more intimidating in this barren star universe. The various strange phenomena in front of his eyes made Jian Wushuang not act lightly. He already guessed in his heart that this is the place of tragedy. He is waiting, and his subconscious intuition tells him that everything here is just the beginning. Time is here. It has long lost any value. With the sky rising to the sky for 100 days, suddenly this ancient and desolate and sad place suddenly began to bloom with countless divine power. The sacred ancient divine power of Biju Dome filled the earth in an instant, followed by extremely pure and rich or golden. Red blood fell like Hangyu. Whereas the sword Shuang Shuang, who is fully absorbed in thinking of such a come out, directly by countless blood took a cool look. The sword Wu Shuang, who was poured into a body, hurriedly displayed his magical power to open up a transparent barrier and hid it. Descending with the blood of God, there are countless huge limbs and broken arms that surround the ancient charm of God. The broken armor engraved with ancient cipher text is full of blood, and broken soldiers are even more uncountable. Qi Jian Wushuang became more and more shocked when he looked at it, and at the same time, he had roughly guessed the true meaning of this sad place. When the vast and boundless earth was filled with broken soldiers and corpses, the entire place of tragedy became a place of burial. The long cry of sorrow and demon resounded, as if heaven and earth were telling a lament. Wu Jianshuang's state of mind seemed to resonate with everything in this burial land and began to move uncontrollably. Every one of the supreme gods who has the power to stun the ancients is lost here. I don't know. Jian Wushuang shook his head hard, and he began to find that his consciousness was affected. However, an even more incredible scene appeared. The corpse of the gods scattered on the ground rose and fell like clouds of smoke, and disappeared in a blink of an eye. In its place, the countless pounds of powers were crushed from a faraway place. Before the power of the gods arrived, the Sky Dome took the lead to start the large-scale crack collapse. Hagi originally hung over the sky for 100 days. At this moment, the purple feathers were born, transformed into a three-legged purple black enough to cover the sky. There are countless divine powers transformed into an incomparable great horror existence, or take the wind and the clouds, or 3 or 5 times, and go to this vast battlefield. The sky of heaven was smashed by divine power under their presence. This ancient world battlefield cannot bear the existence of this unimaginable giant engine. Just the majestic and mighty divine power they radiated, they constituted the most extreme collision belonging to that era. The heavens and the earth were trembling. The sound seemed to be fixed. The sword is unparalleled and terrifying. The existence of the level of the universe is the most ordinary in this scene of tragedy. He can't imagine that when the gods of that level have been reached, what will they be for? On top of the chaotic sky, hundreds of three-legged purples swaying with black purple tail feathers, projecting the extinct purple flames downward. Every beam of flame easily tears the rule road, leaving a violent and wanton atmosphere. There was no killing, and the ultimate battle began completely. The unimaginable divine power, even if it is only a trace, is enough to wreck the zombie of the virtual universe, and the invincible supreme even cannot survive for a long time. Divine soldiers fight, powerful to the extreme existence of the old and wild and ancient, with the purest fight, struggling to manipulate the divine soldiers to kill each other. Brightness is everywhere. There is supreme being. Use a long bow to shoot down the 3-footed purple Wu above the sky, and use the purple Wu corpse to throw the purest burst into the opponent. There is no existence, holding the phaseless Excalibur to fight against the enemy at the last moment and die together. There is nothing but generous death, and Dedeo laughs loudly before disappearing. On Wu Yanyan's battlefield, there was an extremely chaotic collision. Like the lament of the sea monster singing, it blew up in Jian Wushuang's mind. He stayed out of the situation, but seemed to be there. He wants to close his eyes, but his pupils are enlarged a little bit crazies. Lunatics, all lunatics. What's wrong with all these reincarnations? Even if it is absolutely impossible, can you escape the heavens? Jian Wu's eyes were trembling, and blood was pouring from every pore. Whether the Taos in this world are Chongqing Tao or killing Tao, I don't understand. Painful thoughts can't restrain divergence. The ever-building avenue of faith in his heart began to collapse uncontrollably. Are we all? If so, what's the meaning of the end result? It's just a way of dying. Never had the golden eyes of languidness disappear, and began to appear a touch of dullness. I want to sleep for a while. As the ultimate battle on the sky began to come to an end, all supreme beings disappeared. Jian Wushuang also slowly lowered his eyelids. Wu Tianxiong cried. The rules were broken, and the top road was returned to its original state. What do you mean by chasing for thousands of years, preaching for 10,000 years, and enlightening for 1,000,000 years? Like a clear spring, everything is reborn. A sound broke into my ear. Little guy, wake up. Chapter 45:82. The lament in my ears gradually dissipated, replaced by a slightly cordial call. This call seems to have some magic power, drawing the swordless Wushou, which is almost dead, from the fallen consciousness. He opened his eyes reluctantly, and his eyes were clear and thin. I was sober for a moment, and the subconscious reaction caused the sword unparalleled to move back several feet, and watched the old uncle in white clothes with vigilance. An old with a clear face does not blame Jian Wushuang's impoliteness. He smiled and got up and introduced himself. Hello, little guy, I stop when I call. Without any paralysis, Jian Wushuang thought for a moment, and then said, Have met the old gentleman. Those who can appear here and are not the temple of life. These two items alone are enough for Jian Wushuang to raise the highest vigilance. At the same time, he also began to doubt whether the extreme battle that had appeared before was the old man in front of him. The old self-proclaimed stopper smiled and waved, You and I meet here, you have a destiny, so you don't have to be restrained. Wu Jian Wushuang was unmoved. After seeing the surrounding scenes, there was a moment of unconsciousness. Countless broken bones were buried or exposed on the ground, and the damaged soldiers and blood-stained armor were mostly buried by sand and stone. Even if the avenue disappeared for hundreds of millions of years, the incomparable pure, divine power still protected their masters, just as it was then. The scene in front of him was as he had seen before. But the Supreme Being has all fallen. Is this the real place of tragedy? Jian Wushuang asked, wondering how to show his inner thoughts for a moment. When he stopped, he smiled a little, not counting his clear pupils, reflecting the scene above the earth. You call it a place of tragedy, but in my heart, it is a place of burial gods. All go. The words that stop for a while are light, but at the end they show a bit of loneliness. Looked a little strangely and paused, because it was not difficult to hear from his words. The old-timer-like pause seems to have gone through that era, and has been living to the present. After seeing the scene, Jian Wushuang did not believe it anyway. There would be a supreme being to survive the ultimate battle. He seemed to be able to feel what Jian Wushuang thought, and he stopped to recollect from his memories and said, The old man is willing to wait here only to find the right person. Who's coming? Me? Jian Wushuang didn't know how to make his position. He didn't wait for him to speak, and asked himself, Little guy, why are you here? As soon as this statement came out, Jian Wushuang became a little embarrassed. The divine power universe fell. As the new life shrine palace master, after careful calculations, he was ready to come to a place of sadness and energy, but these words came to his mouth. Bien didn't know how to speak. I do think there is too much malice to stop at this time, but if you do leave them, am afraid to wave them to suppress them or expel them out. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to gamble on the risks he took. During this brief stalemate, Jian Wushuang suddenly realized that the 3 spaceships carrying the entire Palace of Life did not seem to have come to this side of tragedy. He trembled in his heart. The disciples of the tens of thousands of life shrines, but the last sustenance of the divine universe. If there is any loss, it will be a disaster for the divine universe. No, it won't. Jian Wushuang turned quickly to find the whereabouts of several spacecraft. Su Shi stopped and called him in time. Little guy, what are you looking for? As the voice dropped, he stopped and stretched out his hand, and the original dim sky seemed to float up and down, and a ripple rippled suddenly. Then the space opened outward, and the cosmic boat that could balance with the stars slowly sailed out of the crack, but the deadly silence on its deck did make Jian Wushuang tense for a moment. He is very clear. The dark channel leading to this sad and fertile land is so powerful that even the Supreme and others are deceived, and the weaker one is not sure that he died on the spot. Regardless of the time to stop saying hello, Jian Wushuang leapt to the deck, only a little relieved after seeing the scene in front of him. I saw that the Blood Pool Supreme and others all leaned on Zhou Wei and fell asleep. From the long breath, there was no danger to their lives. Their realm is too weak. They resolutely enter the burial god's land. At least it is detrimental to the realm, and the soul is lost, and they become the nourishment of the burial god's land. Therefore, I have to let them fall asleep to avoid many ban. With the voice came the straight and thin figure already standing behind Jian Wu's body. Listening to the explanation, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate, turned and arched his hands and said, "Thank you, Mr. Lao, for your help, and the younger generation is grateful." Su Shi smirked and waved his hand. "Don't rush to say thank you first, although I have taken care of each other. But those who are too low level in the realm of consciousness, I'm afraid we can't escape this." Shin Jianwushuang sank in his heart and hurriedly urged Shentong to prepare to awaken everyone, but thinking about his own Shentong might not be able to awaken them. Even if he urged the blood of the original source in his body, he tried to wave to several people. The result is not the same with the blood of the origin, blood waves, giant axe, Lon, and cold, as a few people took the lead to wake up. Visit the Lord of the Wushuang Palace. When Xingbua Supreme and others were looking at Xiang Jinshuang, they immediately turned around and worshipped on one knee. Do NT use those red tapes anymore? www. Novel. Jian Wushuang closed his hands to signal their rise. Bloodwave Supreme shook his head, and 2 tears burst into his eyes. Old man thought that we could only drink and hate in that dark passage, and never thought we would reach this sad place safely. The universe is endless in my temple of life. Fujun, Long Rushuang couldn't hold back, and hurriedly wept into Jian Wushuang's arms, and wept, "I thought I would never see you again." Wu Jianshou rubbed the fairy's hair in his arms and whispered, "I promise you, even if I die, I will never see you again." Most of the shrine disciples in the first cosmic boat woke up, showing the joy of the rest of the life after the disaster. Only Lon, who stood beside the Supreme Blood Emperor, calmed down and set his sights on the straight and thin figure behind Jian Wushuang. This is not the time for comfort. I want to count all the disciples to deal with the next thing. Jian Wushuang said. Cold nodded and nodded, leaving his arms. After staring at each other, such as Sun Bo Sun and others, Jian Wushuang rushed to the other 2 cosmic boats. A moment later, Jian Wushuang used the blood of the origin to awaken the disciples in the other two boats. The disciples who went to the place of tragedy this time, there were more than 14,600 people, and nearly 3,000 people stayed in the dark channel forever. The other weaker disciples have also been more or less affected. Chapter 45:83. The salvation of these magical universes ultimately saved so many deaths just after entering this tragic land, which made everyone's hearts clouded. I don't know if it's dull in my heart or the essence of the blood has passed too much. When falling from the cosmic boat, the sword has fallen straight to the ground. Master of Wushuang Palace, Bloodwave Supreme, and others hurriedly held up the falling sword Wushuang. Afterwards, the Bloodwave Supreme urged the magical power, shrouding the divine power to him, slowly soothing the meridians. Nothing. Jian Wushuang's expression recovered, and he waved his hand and stood upright. Immediately, he looked at the stop right in front of him and walked slowly. He solemnly arched his hands, and Jian Wushuang sank in a deep voice. The main sword Wushuang of the Palace of Life Palace, I implore the old man to let me wait in this sad place. The universe is huge, except here there is no place for us to live. After saying this, Jian Wushuang's figure trembled slightly, as if he had emptied all his strength. The of the universe seals the virtual with his body, destroys the supreme soul, and turns into a blow to the sky, blocking the void universe and the ancestor of Fengtian Yuse's burning life to turn into a wall to seek a way for the magical universe. Everything these elders do is to save the last fire of the divine universe. In today's scene, everything in the beginning always came to mind, making Jian Wushuang even more sad. Of course, Shi Dianking's face slowly showed a smile. I have spent some time in this burial place, and someone will accompany me, but it doesn't look boring. As Yunkai Yueming, Jian Wushuang only felt the sorrow in his heart abruptly and arched with excitement. Thank you, old mister, the younger generation, and others are grateful. Bloodwave Supreme and others were also very excited. Looking at each other, the original pressure was reduced a lot. No one dared to approach the sorrowful place of exploration, which was finally entered by the final salary of the divine universe, and the heavens were immortal. On the pitiful land full of bones and corpses, countless vast majestic divine power is still as agile as the Lord lived before his life. Each corpse is an independent existence. From time to time, divine power turns into everything and rises up untiringly, releasing the final breath. Because these divine powers that have existed since the desolation were too vast, even those who are invincible and supreme blood, tentacles, giant axes, and so on, are struggling to walk, let alone nearly 10,000 people, who are far weaker than the Supreme Life Shrine disciple. Every step they take, just the evolution of the undivided divine power, is enough to break each disciple's meridians. When he reached the 100th step, nearly 3,000 disciples of life shrine fell to the ground at the same time. How is this going? Why can't I move anymore? The 3,000 disciples sitting on the ground turned around one after another. What's going on? Jian Wushuang first noticed the strangeness in the rear, waiting to see so many disciples kneeling behind the ground. He froze for a while, then seemed to be aware of it, and rejoiced. The disciples kneeling on the ground listened to the order. From now on, you will immediately realize in place and absorb any divine power that rushes into your body. You must not resist. From now on, no matter whether it is thousands of years or thousands of years, we must keep our minds and practice with concentration. Bangong Lord. The disciples of 30,000 yelled in unison. Even though the spin was firmly in place and practiced separately, Hua Mang rose into the sky, but it was a bit of momentum. God never die, my divine power universe. Bloodwave Supreme eyes were reddish, sighed. Little guy, my understanding is really good. Shirjan smiled comfortably and then moved on. Uncontrollable joy overflowed on Jian Wushuang's face. He realized that this place of tragedy would be the last chance for the entire magical universe to fight against the virtual universe again. Next, every 100 steps, there are disciples of 2,000 people who can't hold on anymore and sit still. The more you move forward, the more pure and powerful the derived godless power is. Huge corpses of gods accumulate. Each raging divine power soars into the sky and splits the space to survive. The puppet also has mottled and broken marks like a mysterious rune, occasionally entangled on one of the corpses. Wu Jian Wushuang can vaguely recognize that it belongs to the breath of sermon, but now it is already broken. Shi Rao is so, even as strong as the blood, he is extremely hot. I must know that it is a more horrible preaching of sermons, and even if you perceive a point, it is definitely more effective than spending hundreds of thousands of epics. He followed and stopped, and more disciples of the temple sat down and realized when Jian Wushuang heard Lan Lan's voice. When he looked back, there was only the supreme of blood waves behind him, and there were less than 100 people such as King Nine Calamity. His wife Lung Rushuang also sat down and realized. Master of Wushuang Palace. Lan Lan stood not far behind her. Sweat beads dripped from her cheeks, and the pressure of divine restraint stopped her. I'll fight here and say goodbye to you. Lan Lan arched a hand and laughed, and then sat down slowly. I hope today's goodbye will be another day. Treasure. Treasure. The two of them said goodbye. Lan Lan's restless expression stayed in Jian Wushuang's mind for a moment, and then Jian Wushuang continued to lead Shuebo and others to move on. The majestic power went straight to the Shaohan, and it seemed to be mixed with Xiangrui Qiming and Baoguang flowing. Intact divine soldiers began to appear, condensed flowing of blood that has been immortal for hundreds of millions of years, and at the same time, the power of more and more vast divine power is even more powerful. After the King Jujia walked for nearly 100 steps, he stopped and realized. Then came the Heavenly Supreme. The great axe realized in turn. Only sword unparalleled. Walking in the middle of it, like a dragon swimming into the sea, not only did not feel the horrible pressure, but the more he moved forward, the more he walked on the ground. Master of Wushuang Palace. The old man also stopped here. Blood Wave Supreme stopped his steps. His eyes seemed to carry a fiery flame. The master of Wushuang Palace shouldered the god's shoulders. It is no longer possible to accompany the Lord, and I hope the Lord will forgive him. Wu Jianshou did not say more, holding his hands with Supreme Blood Wave's arms, and sincerely said, the Supreme Blood Wave is waiting here. Whether it is Wanzai or 100,000 Zai, I will definitely keep my responsibility in mind and make a breakthrough. In addition, Supreme Blood, you can also try to break through yourself. There is no end, and Supreme has been proven. A few short words, like a bloodstained, made him tremble. Wu Jianwushuang no longer talked, smiled, and turned to keep up. Evening bells and long bells ring between heaven and earth. Countless broken avenues circulate in ancient times and are reflected in each other. With only a glimpse, you can find the splendor of their owners. Zuntiandi did not know if reincarnation, but from the top to the top of Tianjiao, to the death of a trafficker, they all worked in the same galaxy and lake to prove themselves. Chapter 45, 84. At this moment, between the vastness of the heavens and the earth, there were only two figures walking slowly. One of them was young and straight, like a sharp sword with Tibetan fronts waiting to be opened. Another old man in white is also thin and straight, like a blunt sword with a sharp edge, converging Tao Guang. There is a broken avenue circulating in its entire body, and there are immortal soldiers converging in the thick soil waiting to be hidden, and the vast divine power of the domineering sky fills every inch of space. But Jian Wushuang didn't have half-hearted enthusiasm, but he followed but stopped firmly and moved forward. From time to time, there are still avenues that have not been damaged, and they want to be close to Jian Wushuang, and they are waved away by the front stop. Where is this going? Jian Wushuang secretly said to himself, and at the same time began to look at the environment of Shino. Time is here, without any passing value. Everything seems to stop at the moment when it died billions of years ago. Why do people like you come here for this reason? He stopped and turned his head and asked. Qi Jian Wushuang was silent, and after a moment, he explained the catastrophe between the two universes. When it comes to the divine power universe has fallen, Jian Wushuang no longer have the mood to continue to talk down. After he stopped listening to his narrative, he didn't make too much statement, but only issued a small sigh. Wu Jianwushuang no longer felt much sadness in his heart. He had long understood that only the endless breakthrough to the top can protect everything he wanted to guard. Now, it is a great fortune. It's all about the magical universe, and Jian Wushuang dare not relax in the slightest. Before I die, I will be ashamed of everything I do. Jian Wushuang secretly vowed. His eyes became hotter. In the next march, even Jian Wushuang, who was in a state of mind, began to get a little anxious. In such a majestic and mighty divine power, even if it was one day of realization, it was something that I had never dared to imagine before, but there was no sign of stopping at all, which made Jian Wushuang's state of mind slightly shaken. He seemed to be able to see through his mind, and the sound of stoppage came to his ears. Is it too late? Wu Jianshuang was embarrassed and said, ashamed. When he stopped, he raised his head and smiled, and then stretched his fingers forward. Don't worry, your way is just ahead. It is like seeing the moon, and seeing the moon, everything changes in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The godless power rose in the wind, and thousands of soldiers rolled on the ground straight into the sky, with billions of gods connecting them. The dazzling and magnificent divine power directly smashed the entire chaotic cloud, and the countless soldiers seemed to reopen their consciousness and roam freely above the sky. The next moment, like a galloping dragon, thousands of magic soldiers fell into the ground like a falling star. The supreme divine power spreads like a lotus flower, sweeping away completely to the ground. Jian Wushuang's heart is terrified. If the divine power is plundered, let alone him, I am afraid that it will be difficult for the top supreme to survive. But the scene envisioned in his heart did not appear, and I saw that the stop was standing there like an ape, and one stroke with one hand was like a curtain, and the vast divine power swept across the ground, suddenly surged into the sky like a giant sea gate. Boom, boom. The supreme divine power collided with the upper sky like the most magnificent picture. The divine power dissipated by itself, and it turned into a star-shaped huamang, slowly falling below the heavens and the earth. You are sacred, ancient, and chaotic. That is the charm that blends with the breath of eternity. Jian Wushuang stood in place, holding back his inner shock and catching the falling huamang. When the huamang enters the water, it will naturally melt into the meridians just by sticking to the skin. This is the breath of the avenue. Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. In huamang, almost like a rain curtain, every trace had a different avenue. Follow me. Shi Jiao smiled and stepped into the avenue composed of thousands of magic soldiers. Qi Jian Wushuang Strong endured the fiery heart, strode directly to this good fortune. He was only the first step, and his feet were pierced by a powerful gun. Sun Shun's blood dripped down the tip of the gun. But Jian Wushuang's figure just shook slightly, then proceeded firmly. Every step he took, the sharp soldiers would easily tear every inch of his skin. Bian Yingrun's blood was pouring from the soles of his feet and calves. However, Jian Wushuang did not feel as if he did not feel any stagnation. He was like the most devout and firm worshiper, stepping forward step by step. Behind him, on the avenue composed of divine power, a layer of shining blood was left. Qi Jian Wushuang is supporting. The soldier, who can cut even the soul, left deep marks on his feet and calf, and the pain in his body was far less than 1/10 of the pain of his soul being cut. The flesh and blood on the sole of the lame foot was cut, and the deepest part of the skin was exposed. The firm state of mind began to shake, and the figure of the stop was ahead. Jian Wushuang felt so distant. I can't help but persevere. For those seniors who have died, I can live. They are all in exchange. Even if I really want to die, it will surely die on the battlefield. Wu Jianwushuang only felt that his mind was open and clear. The pain of the original spirit being cut seemed to have been reduced a lot. I said to Supreme Master Xie, I will fight to break through. That is an oath to others, but also to myself. He seemed to be in pain. His face paled with a smile. An even more incredible scene appeared. Jian Wushuang began to let go of his feet and moved from the original to the running, like a lotus flower blooming on the avenue of divine power. A thin but firm figure was running forward. I do not know how long it took, only to feel that the huamang in the sky had dissipated and the sky was back to chaos. Only a splendid avenue is immortal in this sad and humble place. The various horror divine powers are like giant pillars, propping up this unknown tragedy. The derived divine powers seem to be attracted by some kind of power instead of being excluded, but divided into numerous influxes where they are needed. When a pair of feet that have no stick of flesh stick to the end of this immortal avenue, even if they wait for a long time, they can't help it. The hem of the robe was completely cracked, and the blood seemed to be completely drained. Only those eyes that are still as immortal as the stars have stopped. He paused and said, I can feel a stronger force in your body. Why not release it to help you move forward? Qi Jian Wushuang did not speak and slowly shook his head, then couldn't hold it anymore, and fell to the ground. Chapter 45, 85. I wonder if it is a dream or an illusion. He reached out to open the avenue of God's understanding in Jian Wushuang's consciousness. At the moment Kai opened, she suddenly woke up. You are awake, little one. Shi stopped and stood on the dojo constructed by divine power, looking at Jian Wushuang with relief. Qi Jian Wushuang stood up with one hand and stood up instantly. What is this place? Looking at the huge square built by the vast divine power under his feet, Jian Wushuang has not yet responded. Here, this is where you should be aware. Shi smirked. Wu Jian Wushuang is not lacking in understanding, but was only mentioned a little bit, and realized instantly that the people who built this doctrine were all the supernatural beings who left behind. Thank you, Mr. Old. Jian Wu doubled his fist, admiring even more when he looked at the stop. Su Shi stopped clapping and said, This is just the best place for you, but the final practice depends on your own creation. Yes, Jian Wushuang promised when he was about to cross-legged practice. He was stopped. Little guy, this practice has little effect on you. He paused, and then raised his right hand and raised it gently. At the time of his ascension, the Tai Luo divine sword hung behind Jian Wushuang rose to the sky, hovering over his head as if possessing a sage. The practice is the process of continuous seeking and preaching. You have touched that level faintly, and I will give you a little insight. Su Shi stopped talking quietly, but every word like a hammer smashed into Jian Wushuang's mind. Since chaos has not opened, when the heavens and the earth are still one, chaos is the Tao. Chaos turns into two turbid airs, and these two airs are two roads. Until the great world is opened and the poverty is endless, the Tao will increase. The Tao is not extreme, but it is extreme. Some people have a glimpse into the mystery and prove themselves. Some people are so poor that they cannot touch that meaning. Little guy, although you already have a complete Tao, it is not yours, but in your current state, you can realize that trace of meaning, which is rare. All I can do now is to keep you in the way of your heart and keep your mood. In a few words, Jian Wushuang seemed to feel something, but it was fleeting. He almost blurted out, "Mr. Old, what you say in your mouth? Where can I go if I master it?" Step. I didn't care about Jian Wushuang's pride, and stopped and said, "Supreme existence." Boom. In God's consciousness. It is like blowing up a thunderbolt, and Sword Wushuang can no longer be calm. He directly reached out for a move, starting with the Taro Excalibur, and the irresistible power surged. Holding the Tai Luo Excalibur, Jian Wushuang is like a sharp sword out of the sheath, showing its sharp edge. Yes, the power is sharp. It seems to have some insight into kendo. Shi Jiao seemed somewhat satisfied. Qi Jian Wushuang groaned a little, then firmly said, "Old gentleman, I think I have roughly understood the inner mood of my heart and determined to enter the Tao with a sword." Suddenly, he nodded and motioned for the sword unparalleled. He is in this vast and mighty divine doctrine, and the divine power he has lost can be replenished almost instantly. The old sword Wushuang is no longer reserved, and the chaotic domineering body is directly opened. Yongyi, Wu Jian Wushuang, directly exhibited the first form of Tai Luo sword code, and the fiery black gas poured from the sword body, transforming into a black ball form and stopping at the time. He has the blessing of immense divine power, which is just the first form of this sword code, and his momentum and power are several times better than before. When the black ball was about to hit the stop, the space was slightly delayed, and then the black ball was divided into two from the center, which turned into black smoke and dissipated. For this situation, Jian Wushuang did not have any accident, and directly brought the third type of sword to dusk. Suddenly, with the time stop as the center, the pits that should have been broken and collapsed did not appear. Instead, a burst of repulsion forced the sword to fly, without double-clicking. He walked back dozens of feet, and the sword unparalleled stabbed the ground to stop the receding body, and the blood in his body rolled violently. With a choked sweat in his throat, he slowly got up, rather than having no effect on the time, Duan Jianjian dusk, but the repulsive damage was fed back to Jian Wushuang, which made him extremely depressed. From time to time, he stayed where he was from beginning to end, moving even one step, looking at his light and light wind. I'm afraid he hasn't even tried hard. Qi Jian Wushuang adjusted his mentality, took a deep breath, and quietly gave birth to the fourth style. For seasons, the quiet and silent Hanmang emerged from the soles of Jian Wushuang's feet, with the blessing of the mighty divine power of the dojo, which swept the entire dojo almost instantaneously. In this mode, even the divine power that supports the operation of the dojo has a momentary stagnation. It's now. Wu Jianso suddenly jumped. The divine power was completely poured into the Tai Luo divine sword, and he went down in the air and stopped violently. Jab's cut, which can almost tear the cosmic dome, left only a pale mark in the air of this sad place. By the time this sword mark cut in front of Shizhan, there were almost only inches. After a while, stop and stretch out in the middle of the food, and just gently pinch the sword mark that was cut, directly killing him. The first shot was stopped, and the sword Jianshuang, who had fallen to the ground, did not stop. When the sole of the foot stepped on the ground, he ran directly to the stop, suddenly approaching, a free Tailuobo sheik in the heavens, and the earth emerged from behind Wu Jianshuang. All the previous moves are serving this moment. The huge treasure looks like a mountain. With the sword of Wushuang, it is down. A A slight collision sounded quietly. Time seemed to stop. The virtual image of Wu Tailuo's supreme even had time to retreat. The sword Wu Shuang was still hanging in the air. The sword in his hand stopped at a distance from the palm of his hand, but it was hard to get half an inch. Shizhe still stood in place, with the palm of his right hand raised above his head, as if holding a sword generally blocked Jian Wu Shuang's strongest blow. The person who created this set of swordsmanship has a lot of experience. If he refines it further, he can be regarded as truly mellow. Shi paused quietly and seemed to be a little sorry, pushing his right hand slightly upwards. In a hurry, as the tide receded, the sword flew out without double-clicking. The stoppage of the strike seemed to be as windy as the wind, but it really grabbed him and almost made him lose the ability to resist directly. Turning swiftly, Jian Wushuang spit out a large mouthful of God's blood directly, and the Taro Excalibur, which had not left his hand, also slanted into the side. An unprecedented sense of powerlessness struck my mind, and the last time this powerlessness belonged to my own virtual who broke the universe to kill. Suddenly, he stopped with his hands on his shoulders and walked slowly towards the sword, unparalleled. Who wrote this set of swordsmanship? Wu Jian Wushuang slowly got up, stood with the Tai Luo divine sword, is the Tianjiao predecessor in my divine universe. It's a heavenly pride to be able to understand this sword technique, but why doesn't he refine this sword technique further? That's because the predecessor who created the sword canon has already disappeared. Jian Wushuang said sadly. Chapter 4586. He paused and nodded. That's it, but it's a blessing that this sword can be passed down. I waited for Sword Wushuang to speak and stopped and said again and again, separated from chaos, the heavens and the world were born. Although there are thousands of swords, there is really a sword-like sword that can communicate with you. Qi Jian Wushuang, obviously also thinking about this issue. When he tried to talk about Tai Luo Jian, he didn't say anything. Hey, yeah, Tai Luo Jian Ba Ju Qiao has the power to easily break the stars, but does it really fit his own mind? Even if the inheritance is immortal in his own hands, even if he can exert the power of Tai Luo Jian, but it is only the supreme kendo of Tai Luo. Stop talking and say, you need to be clear about every word I say. Your perception of kendo is far beyond what you think, but even if you can see through every kendo and blend in, they are still not yours. Every kendo will belong only to the person who created them. From the moment you practiced this sword classic, in fact, you left a slight sword mark in your mind, and this sword mark is a gap. All you have to do now is find your own kendo. At the same time, his right hand fluttered in the air, and the invisible but tangible waves could make Jian Wushuang look at him. Although there was nothing in the hand that stopped, the sharp, intangible breath made Jian Wushuang clear. That is an invisible sword, which belongs to the kendo that stops by itself. Wu Jian's unparalleled heart surge, when the Tai Luo divine sword is about to be placed on one side. As time goes by, I will realize the mood that is gradually forming in my heart. There is no glorious sword meaning. Some are just the purest one-stroke one. I've been looking for my own kendo, but it's always fleeting, and am afraid that the kendo I realized is incomplete, and it has been put on hold until now. Now, I don't run away anymore, even if the sword code would be incomplete, but I don't regret it. Qi Jian Wushuang opened his eyes violently, and Jin Yunhuamang escaped from his eyes. Stars and godliness began to gather around the palms where Hagi originally raised the wind. One frame at a time, slow to the extreme action, is like breaking down the sword in mind. The complex and mysterious to the extreme pattern began to appear around the sword Wushuang. Yan Shijian had already left Jian Wushuang far away, and looked at him comfortably from a distance, melting in all heaven and earth standing outside. Into the sword. Suddenly, the bright, divine patterns floating around the body, all gathered under the palm of the right hand of Jian Wushuang. The invisible sword body, the divine power as the hilt, the long wind condensing the blade, and the pattern in the meantime, a very strange but wanton long sword appeared. This is the sword form of Jian Wushuang. It is very different from the previous one, but it is better than the previous vast sword. Even if he had held the Taro Excalibur in his hand and released a sword to break the might of the sky, he never exudes endless magnificent repression as he does now. The long hair breaks the girdle and dances behind him. The pale golden eyes flow out of the glorious Huamen, like the presence of God, exuding endless power. For the first time, the magical powers of Wu Fuyu around the dojo gave birth to agitated breath. The unpowered divine power derived from Sun seems to feel the sword meaning in the gestation, and he is mad from the quartet and wants to be integrated with it. Suddenly, he waved his hand and added a barrier to the outside of the dojo, blocking worship without subjective power. The long sword with the engraved gold pattern is held high above his head. At this moment, the sword Wushuang seems to be turned into a sword, and a hazy treasure phase occupies half of the dojo. I have a sword. I would like to invite Mr. Gee, now, let's have a look. Shen roar emanated from his chest, and he took off the shape of the sword. Huge treasures are also in shape. The sword full of sacred ritual is a kendo that belongs to the sword unparalleled. Endless shining golden pattern helps the storm rise, and with that sword's potential, it blooms completely. OM. The next moment, the dojo built by divine power trembled, and the shape of the sword came straight. The almost indestructible dojo suddenly tears long natural marks, and at the same time, the remaining dojos fall apart quickly. Suddenly, he stopped at the center of the sword's reach, and the handicapped barrier of magical power was almost immediately swallowed up. When the entire dojo was torn in half by the cracks in the heavens, the disappearing, dazzling golden divine pattern suddenly turned into a mongju rising from the bottom of the dojo and eventually swallowed up the entire dojo. The most magnificent and sacred blast lasted for 10 full breaths and finally ended in a body shape. The divine power Huamong was scattered, and the dojo that was damaged by such a worldly attack slowly emerged. Countless divine powers turned into silk threads to hold the sword unparalleled, and the damaged dojo spilled everywhere like stars. Thousands of mythical soldiers below the dojo also trembled at the same time, seemingly unable to restrain the display of divine power. Laying on top of the divine power, Jian Wushuang's breath was breathless. Although the lost divine power was filled up instantly, the painful meaning of directing to the soul still made Jian Wu dazzled. He is just this kind of prestige, and he is almost drawn to death. If it is displayed in the universe where the divine power cannot be quickly replenished, I am afraid it is a time of fate. Su Shi's figure reappeared, standing on a shard and heading towards Jian Wushuang. Is this your kendo? Shi paused, asking. Jian Wushuang stunned, then proudly said, This is my way. Su Shi face began to show a smile, only said 4 words, It is absolutely stunning. Mr. Xiaolao advised. Jian Wushuang arched, expressing joy. Suddenly she laughed. My advice is not very useful. Everything is what you think and realize. Wu Jianshou shook his head. It is precisely the teachings of the old gentleman that I can dare to take that step. Otherwise, I'm afraid I will never stand still. When he paused his head for a moment, Jian Wushuang's sword that was so amazing and brilliant was already fully aware of the dazzling sword issued by his own kendo. Since then, he will surely become more and more fused on his own avenue. What is the extreme state of kendo? Do you know? Ji Jian, Wu Shuang groaned for a moment, then said with some uncertainty, human and sword united? Invisible? Hidden front cover? Su Shi stopped laughing and laughed. He did not refute or agree with Jian Wushuang. Numerous divine powers have sprung away from the foot of the stop, or turned into a butterfly, or chased birds. He slowly extended his palm, a bird chasing at his fingertips, flapping his wings up and down. When the bird is willing to stay at the tip of your sword, everything is done. After saying this sentence, the body of the stop turns into a cloud of smoke, and it naturally disperses. He dissipated with him, and there was endless, vast, divine power. Old gentleman, Jian Wushuang, stood up holding his body and looked where the disappearance stopped. Chapter 4587. If it wasn't for the broken dojo slowly being constructed, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang would really take all that happened as a dream. After chanting again and again for a few times, Jian Wushuang returned to God. This old man, who is also a teacher and friend, after a period of time together, is deeply imprinted in the heart of Jian Wushuang. What Shi Tzu did is almost equivalent to saving the last fire of the entire magical universe. Facing the direction where the stoppage disappeared, Jian Wushuang bowed deeply. I have proved my own kendo. Jian Wushuang only feels that the sense of powerlessness facing the future is rapidly weakening, and his future is quickly opening. When Jian Wushuang looked at his realm subconsciously, he couldn't help exclaiming. It turned out that unknowingly, which belongs to the middle supreme, disappeared, as if it was a matter of course, directly promoted to the top of the supreme. Sui, who even needs thousands of years to break through, has unexpectedly made a breakthrough. Jing Ning shook hands and felt the resurgence of the mighty power. Jian Wushuang swept away the previous tiredness and quickly sat down and stabilized. I broke through the complete realm directly, which had never happened before, and he had to deal with it carefully. After the supreme peak, it is the supreme. When Wu Hua meditates, the infinite power reappears to float around him like a flood of water. The general cultivation environment of this blissful heaven is just a general tailor-made for Jian Wushuang. While easily stabilizing the realm, it can also distract and consolidate the kendo you just realized. Jian Wushuang, who was extremely sensitive to the meaning of the sword since he was a child, already knew how terrible his first form of kendo was. The power of the first form is the power that the taro of the last form of taro sword can be used. The two are comparable, even more than the Tailuo Jiandian. Jian Wushuang has not dared to imagine the upper limit of his kendo. This is my own kendo. Naturally, it should be called Wushuang, but how should Jianni be named? Jian Wushuang thought about it, and then he had an answer. It's called Zingahuhai Jinni, swordless eyes scorched, setting the name of the supreme sword code that shocked the world in the future. After re-evolving kendo several times, Jian Wushuang fell into a deep sleep with satisfaction. High Supreme is not his goal. Even if he did not enter this sad place at the beginning, the minimum requirement set for himself is Top Supreme. In fact, what he said to Bloodwave Supreme was also spoken to himself. He was originally the top and supreme goal he pursued, but now he has set this goal in a state that was almost unthinkable before. Only if you break through yourself can you win. Everything the vain universe will do today will be returned thousands of times. Broken Avenue with the vast divine power flowing around the already asleep Jian Wushuang. From time to time, a little rune hidden into his clothing. In this sorrowful land shrouded by endless divine power, every humble but tenacious breath continued to thrive. Every disciple in the palace of life has fallen asleep for a long time, but from the tight brows, we can see that none of them relax. The humiliation of a bereavement made everyone try their best to break through. From time to time, only a cosmic boat sighed. The short-formed river spirit sat on the railing and looked at the vast place of sadness and glory. His eyes were dazzling, and he didn't know what was thinking. Extremely north of the universe, starry sky, for hundreds of millions of years, there have been no stars in the sky. At this moment, there are nearly 100 extreme divine powers. In front of these powerful supremes, the nine-headed zombie gods open their pupils together, staring closely at the sight wrapped in chaos and mighty power. This is the forbidden area where the ants in the divine universe fled. The grotesque voice of the murmur resounded from the mouth of the zombie. On the side of the side, the emperor of the god of refining God nodded, and his face looked ugly. Only then did they let them escape. Since their ants can get in, why can't you get in? The zombie looked at 8 Desolation. Een said, "Did you really get in, or did you let them go through the enemy?" At that time, Yeo Huangzhen's face was even more ugly, and Shuli was released directly. What do you mean? The zombie was furious, and the more horrifying virtual force directly crushed it, as if the realm of the abyss of the heavens almost ran to kill. When the 8 desolate gods were about to burst into a virtual explosion, a figure with a thick, smoky body appeared, and they shot directly to suppress the supernatural powers of the 2 snakes and the 8 desolate gods. "It's you again. Eat one." The zombie was furious, and his 9 heads shouted in unison, "Do you really want to oppose this seat?" The black smoke dissipated, taking a look at the zombie and smiling coldly. "Stupid! You don't deserve to be opposed to me. Now the 2 universes are at war. You privately beheaded the gods and clans of this universe, really when the entire virtual universe is you whatever it takes. You—" The zombie was dumb, and was brought into a high hat out of thin air, which made him speechless, and he stopped speaking after a cold hum. "One day, I'm going to blast your head into dregs." Zombie secretly resents. Chi Yeni no longer said much, and his eyes changed from the place of sadness to the emperor's ancestral site on the other side. "I want to kill all the possibilities or impossible in the bud. All of them will die in my hands." A glance glanced at the cold. Then 2, 3, and so on emerged behind him in turn. "If you want great creation, will follow me and go to the emperor's ancestral site." After uttering this sentence, Yen first took the phagocyte to the emperor's site. The face of Subahuang Suzun is still ugly. He didn't look at the zombie god, and directly followed him with a group of Suzuns. The remaining vanity was about to move, but he was afraid of the zombie and did not dare to leave. Finally, an Urkin Shuzuan dared to step forward, and before he spoke, he was shattered into blood by the snake god. "Sooner or later, one day, I will slaughter you up and down," Zombie said fiercely, and then ordered the remaining Shuzuan to go directly to the emperor's ancestral site, the cataclysmic battle between the 2 sides of the universe. Even if both the of the universe and the of vanity disappeared, there was no sign of stopping, and the ancient grievances accumulated as if finally there was a vent, and it was out of control. 25,000 years have passed. The sorrowful land is immutable. The infinite divine power is still vast, and even the derived divine power is more full, covered by the divine power in the outermost part of this pathetic place. 3,000 figures stand still like a sculpture. Each of them has the same appearance as 5,000 years ago, and even because of the improvement of the realm, he has to become much younger. The lives of these disciples were completely closed, and it was only 10 years before they exhaled a suffocation, and then went back and forth, undergoing a complete transformation. Lying on the railing, it seemed that she had fallen into a sleeping thin figure, and suddenly jumped up. Chapter 45:88. Regarding the breath of all things, I am afraid that it will be difficult for anyone to compare with this thin and even awkward figure. I was silent for nearly 5,000 years, and the Lord Helling jumped up and fell to the ground like a fish. I was in front of him, the first group of life shrine disciples to meditate to this day. Blowing his nose, He Ling's small eyes widened arrogantly. It seems that the enlightenment of these disciples who are closest to them is about to melt. He seems to confirm He Ling's speculation. A long breath revolves from the whole body of a disciple, and at the same time, nearly 1,000 long breaths recover at the same time. The character of Luo Ling shuddered and ultimately dominated the realm. That is the breath that belongs to the ultimate realm. If it is just the breath of the ultimate dominator, it is naturally difficult to comprehend the magical eyes of the river spirit in the river, but now it belongs to the breath of the ultimate dominator, but it has reached 3,000. What kind of concept is that? Only the disciples of the 3,000 temples who stayed in the outermost layer. Only after 5,000 years of enlightenment, they have reached the ultimate dominance as if they had exhausted their lead. This is just the disciples at the outermost periphery. What about disciples who are one step ahead? Luo Helling turned back from the previous shock, rising from the bottom of his heart with uncontrollable excitement. He knows that the entire divine power universe, the Temple of Life, has been saved. As soon as he thought about this, He Ling could no longer fall asleep and rushed to the deepest place like a child. He had to take a good look. The little guy who was eternally proud and growing all the time would give him a what a surprise. However, just when he was raising his feet and preparing to leave, He Ling realized that enlightenment was ethereal and he and heaven and earth were one thing. If he disturbed himself, the consequences would be unthinkable. He thought for a second, and He Ling gave up and said with a lip, "Forget it, don't bother the kid first. It's not too late to talk until he breaks through." After he made up his mind, He Ling jumped into the spacecraft, stared at two small eyes, and observed the disciples who were about to wake up. As the breath of ultimate became richer and purer, the 3,000 disciples on the outermost side woke up at the same time. God, I have reached the ultimate. I actually reached that state. How many years have you cultivated? And it's really terrible to reach such a state. From the beginning, he didn't believe his disciples and fell into ecstasy, and then he wanted to move on. However, at this time, the coughing sound from the spacecraft attracted the attention of 3,000 disciples. Yes, Lord Helling? I won't be dazzled. Lord He Ling is not dead yet. Listening to the noise, River Aura almost jumped off the deck. Enough! Who said that your adult Helling is dead? I tell you, even now I can live in feng shui even if I am stuck in a virtual universe, said the insignificant little old man with his hands on his hips and his beard staring. Then he said earnestly again, "Okay, you have to shut up, Lord He Ling. You do NT want to go forward now. Stay here safely. Do NT disturb the remaining disciples' practice. You have just been promoted to the ultimate master. Be sure to be stable. Don't forget, the realm above you is the realm of clouds and mud." Luo Helling's remarks made the 3,000 disciples instantly hot. How could they not understand that the supremacy was vain? In other words, there is a war between the two universes. At present, they are still at best dead cannon fodder. They have no effect. Only when they are on the Supreme Court can one or two enemies be buried before death. Now, in such a great place, even if it is a second of vain, it will never be allowed. The disciple, with a good mood, immediately sat down again and started a new round of realization. The other disciples also entered the country again after investigating their own situation. The divine power of the universe fell. As the final salary, the expectations and missions they shoulder will force them to grow. I waited for all the disciples to sit down. He Ling returned to the previous position, and I stared at the chaos but couldn't see the sky. When will all this happen? When will it be back on track? After another 1,000 years, the second batch of disciples began to recover, and they also reached the ultimate dominant state, and even individual disciples with deep understanding began to touch that level of barriers. After Ling stepped up and conducted some preaching, they continued to enter the perception. Hey, it seems that they are inseparable from me. Ling sighed, raising his hands behind his back and preparing to patrol again. As Ling turned around, a majestic beam of divine power rose up. Although it was particularly inconspicuous in this vast divine power, it made Ling tremble. The concussion that symbolized the achievement of supremacy was raised among the third group of disciples who sat down and realized. Next, the second supreme divine power rose. The third way, the fourth way, seventh. A total of 7 supreme divine powers rose to the sky and soon returned to peace. He did not cause any thunderous thunder, heaven and earth strange sounds, and some were just symbols of the supreme divine power. The 7 disciples who obtained the supreme avenue first stood up and looked at the supreme divine power that emerged from their bodies in disbelief. Certified supreme. One of the older middle-aged disciples murmured softly, and when he saw the true supreme power rising from the wind, his eyes turned red instantly. It seems that the magical universe has really been saved. He inspired. A gratification that was very different from his acting style was revealed from his eyes. The sorrowful land doesn't know how time passes, but the boring river spirit counts the days every day. Then, at this time of 8,000 years, the heavenly supreme regained consciousness. The immense divine power rushed straight up into the dome. The divine, supreme divine power became deeper and finally settled in a half-step invincible supreme. 28,000 years ago, it broke through the real natural divide. The true invincible supreme will only be a matter of time. Immediately following the awakening of the Emperor Tianxian, there is also the Supreme Axe. He also took that step, reaching a half-step invincible supremacy. The two encouraged each other, entrusted Ling a little, and again had a second perception. In the meantime, Jian Wushuang's wife Lung Rushuang had awakened, successfully broke through the barriers of the realm, and stayed in the state of elementary supremacy. So far, there are only 3 people who have not yet awakened from the perception. Bloodwave Supreme, 9 Calamities King, Sword Unparalleled, the unpowered divine power. Like the derivation of spiritual wisdom, no longer wanders aimlessly, or hundreds of beams rush to the Supreme, or rush to the King of 9 Calamities like a wave. But more unpowered divine powers are rushing to the center of the entire sad and humble land, with the divine powers remaining in the ancient times of all parties. Chapter 45:89. There, it is the dojo that belongs only to Jian Wushuang. The is spontaneously constructed into a dome by various supreme divine powers, and the charm is filled with the whole dojo from top to bottom, shining golden and brilliant. Beneath the dojo, there are thousands of magic soldiers who act as the cornerstones and inject the charm into the dojo together. At the center of the huge dojo, a very thin figure was sitting there, and the wide black robe on the upper body was torn by the mighty divine power, exposing the exquisite figure showing the divine pattern. The tadpoles seem to be scattered with pale golden hair and hang down on the ground, like the Milky Way starfall. Taro's Excalibur stands on one side. The blade clears in the sheath. For 8,000 years, Jian Wushuang has maintained such a posture for 8,000 years. The vast divine power poured into the body from every pore and nourished every inch of meridians. Every 100 years, Jian Wushuang spit out a cloud of breath and then went back and forth. Wu Gang's unparalleled kendo was re-exercised for 2,000 years. For the past 2,000 years, he has given out his sword in the consciousness all the time, closed his sword, and perfected the perfect harmony of the swords, rivers, seas, and swords. Until the third 1,000 years, Jian Wushuang reluctantly constructed the entire Xinghe Lake, Hai, and Jiani into a frame, and the first form of his battle with the time stopped had only one of the simplest star characters. Although the meaning of a single word is simple, they eventually merged together to cover an endless universe. This is the kendo of Jian Wushuang and his ambition. When the whole kendo was sharpened, Jian Wushuang, who was in the chaos consciousness, wanted to start by opening the gift given to him by the predecessor of the palace. I don't know if it's the same breath or if he shakes his hands. When opening up Dao Yan's spiritual practice, the feeling of the universe also opens at the same time. Two majestic spiritual insights that are so majestic that they can't be added directly faint them. I passed away for another 2,000 years. Ha ha, happy. A loud laughter trembled in the trembling dome, and a thick and restrained divine power surged like a water dragon, completely spreading in the sky. The great Axe Supreme, who reperceives again, wakes up. And this time waking up, he has reached the incredible invincible supreme state. Just for 2,000 years, the great Axe Supreme has been invincible from half a step, reaching the true invincible state. Originally required tens of hundreds of chaos, and now it only takes 2,000 years. I am afraid that since the beginning of chaos, it is hard to see an example. The giant axe who invaded the invincible supreme divine realm swept away the previous fatigue. His eyes were like bright star fields, exuding a glorious huamang from the inside, and the solemn treasure. Immediately afterwards, the heavenly supreme regained consciousness and went straight into the invincible supreme God's realm. The two old friends who are not knowing how many chaos periods accompanied each other and smiled. Their eyes were wet. Because of insufficient strength, the temple of life has been repeatedly humiliated. Because of insufficient strength, the divine power universe has fallen and countless days of arrogance have been destroyed. Only by constantly breaking through can we protect what we want to protect. Heaven, the giant axe smiled proudly. You and I are now in the invincible supreme state of God. How about fighting today? That's what it is. Tianyi laughed loudly, and the bow of that utterly destroyed the sky quietly appeared in his hands. The giant axe retreated hundreds of feet at once, and at the same time countless godless powers began to build a dojo. In the Xiao Xiao dojo, the two statures instantly erupted into an invincible supremacy. The incomparable vast divine power no longer escapes the world like half-step invincible supreme, but emerges in the whole body as if possessing the intellect, and is quite restrained. Two invincible extremes start the most hardy battle. God bowed tightly, using his own divine power as an arrow, and shot out in an instant like a phoenix tail feather, swept towards the giant axe supreme. The giant axe greeted the storm, and the two hit each other heavily, and the resulting burst directly tore the dojo just constructed. Countless crystals of quiet huamang waited for the bow again, and shot at the giant axe with the laugh of the heavenly supreme. The giant axe is backed by an axe, and his body is transformed, and he is confronted with the supreme power with the potential of opening the sky. Crimson divine power against the crystal faint blue mansions, which belongs to the invincible and supreme power, shatters the dojo again and completely disperses in the heavens and the earth. Because the entire place of tragedy is constructed by more ancient and vast divine power, the supernatural powers of the giant axe and the heavenly supreme will be greatly restricted. Maybe it's because of Chongxiu's war intentions that disturbed the silent power. I began to woke up with some disciples with secondary perceptions. The disciple of awakening, at the very least, is the ultimate dominating realm, and at the same time, the new supreme divine power begins to appear. From the original 7 supreme divine realms, it began to increase to double digits and still has an upward trend. Maybe she felt a certain kind of breath, and the coldness awakened from her perception, and a whole new kind of power rose from her meridian. The magnificent dark blue, divine power rushed into the sky, and then dissipated, cold as frost, straight into the supreme divine realm. It's a bit noisy. A slightly lazy voice sounded, and Zhou Jiawang, with white shirt and white hair, awoke from his feelings. There is no wave breaking through the realm, and even the divine power is not exposed for half a minute, so that it usually seems like a good night's sleep. But the more the Jiujia King is, the more horrible it is. Like the magic sword that hides the front cover, it reveals its sharpness in plainness. A deep stream of streamer flowed from his eyes, a slight smile hung from the corner of his mouth. Is it possible to reach such a level of supreme power if I am only half a point better? He only knew that the king of the 9 dragons, and it took him only 8,000 years to completely cross a great realm and touched that more mysterious realm. He is confident that he will be invincible in a chaotic era. And that guy, what kind of Tianjiao attitude will he appear in? Jiujia Wangshen's pure eyes looked at the dojo in the chaos in the distance. Sun Lanlan awoke. She got the Tao under the seat of the cosmos, and she was already indifferent to the realm, and it was because of her mood that she made one jump to the highest peak of Tao. She is not too concerned about her advancement in her realm. From the moment she wakes up, Meimu is full of worries and looks at Jian Shuang's dojo. Unless the realm of divine power reaches the height of the universe, all personal strengths that cannot be weighed on the battlefield will be extremely weak in the face of decision-makers who can save the calamity. Suddenly, Lan Lan has already regarded Jian Wushuang as a decision-maker who can turn the tide. Although the divine power universe has long been occupied, the ever-increasing salary and wages are still growing under the pressure of the virtual universe. Everyone's eyes are converging towards the bright dojo. Together they are looking forward to that guy who has grown up tenaciously and never slacked off half a minute, creating a real miracle. Chapter 45, 90. When the unknown number of divine dojos was destroyed, the 2 invincible supremes both stopped, and the divine power that overwhelmed the dome was fully absorbed. Happy, really happy. Tianyan Supreme closed his bow and laughed loudly. The giant axe supreme nodded frequently, proudly saying, "Now, even if you are against the top 6 mark virtual lords, this one has a fighting power." He retracted the supernatural power, and the 2 fell to the ground. Congratulations to the 2 for being invincible. Lan Lan stepped forward, arching. The giant axe first said, "Thank you, Lan Lan. The 2 of us can be promoted to an invincible state. It is also heavenly pity for my magical universe." Even before 10,000 years have passed, the great Axe Supreme and the Heavenly Supreme have both advanced to the invincible, except for the pity of the heavens, and it seems that there are no other adventures in this great land of creation. Tianyu Supreme followed with a smile. "I think our invincible Supreme should soon add another one." Oh, a few people's eyes suddenly looked at the distant Bloodwave Supreme. The divine doctrine surrounding the supreme blood power is like a huge golden cocoon, completely covering his body, and outsiders can only vaguely see his approximate body. The Supreme Axe frowned slightly and said to himself, "Bloodbook is a half-step invincible supreme, and it has been a long time to indulge in invincibility. It should be much easier than the 2 of me. There are no signs of breakthrough. Relax after the blood pool has successfully advanced to the invincible state. I am afraid that the strength will be much deeper than you and me." Tian Di supremely responded, with almost infinite years to get along. He never doubted the strength of the old man. Hiax nodded. "I hope so." Only Lan Lan's eyes had a subtle and uncertain change when he looked at the doctrine of the supreme enlightenment. On the side of the side, Zhu Jiawang with white hair who was slightly lonely, looked at the dojo that belonged to Jian Wushuang from beginning to end. He desperately wanted to see what kind of posture this ancient evil Tianjiao would appear, and at the same time how far he would throw himself off. I'm afraid he doesn't even know when he took Jian Wushuang as a standard game and became the object he pursued. Extreme acts, the King of Nine Calamities suddenly said, looking earnestly. Can the Nine Calamity be a sudden? Can the Supreme acts supreme step by step to test the mood of Nine Calamity? He heard the words from the giant axe and did not show his displeasure. Instead, he looked at the King of Nine Calamities more admirably. Of course, I can also take a look at what the same arrogance will bring to me. The King Nine Calamities promised, and ascended to the sky with the great axe supreme. The vast divine powers that have survived in ancient times seem to be very sensitive to war intentions. They are like spectators who are not too big to see the excitement and form a party dojo. Geo Supreme, I want keep my hand in a moment. Supreme Axe smiled, and the axe appeared in his hand. Xie Jiuxian Supreme. The King of Nine Kings responded. The power of the top supreme instantly appeared through the body, like a tide. The giant axe supreme stood on the spot and waved his hand sharply, and the great terror power that belonged to the invincible supreme suddenly erupted just as the heavenly gate opened, and the giant sea frenzy loomed. He was just a face-to-face, and the power of Zhu Jiawang, who belonged to the Supreme, was suppressed at once. He just feels like a lone boat in a giant sea, which may be destroyed at any time. Even the flow of his supreme divine power is much slower. The giant axe lay down on the soles of his feet, and the axe in his hand rose to the storm. Numerous patterns rose from the axe handle and completely wrapped it. A gentle wave was enough to tear the axe of any star dome out from the blade tip and cut to the Nine Kings in a three-blade trend. Even in the state of invincible and supreme repression, the performance of King Jiujia is still remarkable. He completely wrapped the top extreme punch directly into the ground dojo and quickly rose to the midair with the help of power. He got a moment of stagnation, and nearly 100 magical powers Mang swept out of his palm, all stabbed at the giant axe. Every cold Mang possesses top and supreme power. The giant axe had no time to swim, so he had to raise the axe to block it. The chilling thorns left a faint white spot on the axe to the giant axe. The Nine Calamity Kings who descended from the sky exuded a unique white on the noble treasure phase emerged from behind him and hit the axe supremely like that. Boom! The majestic power shattered into mottled stars and fell as if the Milky Way was falling, and the sound of Hongzhong Daluo sounded from the axe. Puppet stars scattered. Under this blow, the counterattack of King Julong himself directly caused him to fly backwards, and a ray of blood poured from the corner of his mouth. The great axe was supreme, and it eventually took a few steps backwards. King Jiujia wiped the blood off the corner of his mouth with his sleeve and slowly got up. It is truly an arrogance to shake the invincible realm with the supreme. The great axe waved his hand and put the long axe behind him. Next, I will go straight into the invincible realm. Can you try it? After Nine robbed the king, he immediately said, "Wish to try?" The giant axe is not to say much. The gray-white long hair suddenly breaks the girdle and dances in the air, and the silver-white giant axe in the hands begins to reflect the golden Mang with the blessing of divine power. The majestic power began to be restrained, as if poured into the axe. Nearly 10 taus, and the ghostly image of the supreme axe appeared quietly. They were naked with their upper bodies on their backs, as if they were ancient giants. This is the supernatural power that I felt straight into the invincible state. A total of 11 statures. Supernatural power Kaitian. Suddenly, Huameng burst into the air, and the 11 statures held up the big axe in their hands, as if they were really open to the sky, and turned to the king of 9 calamities. With 11 axe lights, a virtual image of a giant axe that almost broke through the dojo was synthesized and fell down. Looking at the shadow of the axe that fell from the sky, Zhu Jiawang seemed to realize something. He seemed to be returning to the night of the night. Across the tens of thousands of lotus peaks, Xiangrubo light flowed. Green smoke was long and long. What do you understand? What is the word I understand? The way I understand is the way to go forward. Although 9 dead, I still do not regret it. It is the way to live to death. This is my way. When the celestial axe fell, the king of Jujia opened his eyes, and countless cold dawns rose to the sky, and he was not afraid. Followed by a long day. When the light fell, the giant axe stepped on the wind and fell, and in his arms, Zhujian Wang fell asleep. The Supreme Master of 9 calamities has a great realization, and he has clearly realized the way ahead. The giant axe said with a smile, "You guy." Tina shook his head and grinned. "Even preaching and teaching are so rough, even I almost thought it was your full blow." The giant axe smiled supremely, waved to form a side dojo, and put the king of the 9 robbers in it. After a while, everyone's eyes turned to that depth again. Master of Wushuang Palace, it's time to wake up. Chapter 45, 91. Time goes by, and adults healing day and day, and the record of dedication, 12,000 years passed. All the sleeping shrine disciples are fully awake. In this great creation, except for the disciples who died first in the passage, there are more than 11,000 disciples remaining, and they have achieved the ultimate domination. In addition, there are nearly 300 disciples who have successfully transformed into the highest level. There are more than 300 extremes. Even if the dragon family has been handed down so far, such a background, this is a scene that no one can imagine. At the beginning of the day, Supreme Master Sun and Supreme Axe could see this scene. Old tears crossed, and immediately knelt down to the place where it had disappeared 3 times. The disciples of all the temples of life have since really become the ultimate whole cards of the entire God universe. Although these 300 Supreme are only elementary, as long as they break through the other Supreme realm of that layer of cloud and mud, then the middle and higher realms will come to fruition. Since all disciples have awakened, the Great Axe Supreme and the Heavenly Supreme have intensified the cultivation of all disciples to help them stabilize their realm. After the battle with the Supreme Axe, the king of the 9 kings of the 9 dragons regained consciousness and woke up after 2,000 years. The original sharp power began to tend to be introverted, and there was a great potential for hiding the hidden weapon. The streamer in his eyes was even earlier, and the most difficult trace of marks began to fade in him. Everything is going to flourish. Only 2 people still showed no signs of waking. One is Jian Wushuang, and the other is Supreme of Blood. For this reason, the giant axe paid out 12 disciples, responsible for observing and patrolling the 2. "Brother, how long will it take our palace master to wake up?" "It's been 12,000 years, I'm afraid." Before the young disciple's voice fell, his head was hit with a chestnut. "Let's talk a lot, then you can't stand it after more than 10,000 years. What will you do if you are to be promoted to the Supreme and you will sit tens or hundreds of times?" The middle-aged disciple called Sage said seriously. Young disciples rubbed their heads, clamoring and not speaking. This patrol team of 12 people, only the middle-aged man is the elementary and supreme, the rest are the ultimate domination, and he will perform the natural observing sword unparalleled dojo. I stepped forward, and one side had no subjective divine power to naturally hold up the middle-aged disciples and swept towards the most vast and vast dojo. He now encloses the entire giant dojo of Jian Wushuang and is covered with a thick layer of golden mansions, which makes it harder to see the inside. Routine as usual. After the middle-aged disciple peeped through the gap, he turned around and left. When he stepped on the footless power, ready to fall, the sky suddenly shook suddenly. Then the unpowered divine power under his feet suddenly went crazy and shot back uncontrollably. Due to the sudden incident, the middle-aged disciple fell from the sky unprotected and fell heavily on a dog to eat. 3 brothers. The 11 other disciples rushed over and helped the middle-aged disciples. It seems that these divine powers are really not so well controlled. He shook his head helplessly and grinned, looking up subconsciously, and suddenly trembled. I saw the huge dojo hovering in the air for thousands of years and began to seep thick golden water to the bottom. How can this be? The next moment, countless strands of gold water suddenly rushed like galaxies in the sky. Quick, leave this place. The middle-aged disciple reacted first and immediately released the supreme divine power to promote 11 people. The golden water rushed, as if opening the heavenly gate, pouring wildly to the earth. Suddenly, the huge dojo covered with dust for a long time now shattered. Stars scattered, Bao Guang flowed. Thousands of silent soldiers trembled in unison, as if waiting for their former masters. Jin Shui Milky Way vended, but the moment it touched the ground, it condensed into an avenue of divine power. The huge dojo shattered, and the magnificent majesty shone through the world. He was guiding the 10,000 disciples to meditate on the giant axe and the heavenly supreme, and they looked at the golden and magnificent place, and immediately turned into 2 divine powers to fly away. Qi Lanlan trembled and looked at that position in disbelief. Wang Zhijaiwang slowly opened his eyes filled with smiles, and the next moment he rose to the sky, rushing towards the road. He Ling, who was sleeping on the deck, heard the change and jumped straight away. It's changed. After seeing this scene, the other tens of thousands of disciples looked at each other and rushed away in a hurry. The avenue of divine power constructed by the thick and magnificent golden water is full of magnificent power, and there are thousands of gestures of divine power illusion, which are magnificent and sacred. The shattered divine power dojo falls slowly like thousands of stars. Everyone's eyes are staring at the sky, the most dazzling one among thousands of stars. The naked and slender upper body is covered by countless golden mansions, and the magnificent power is revealed from his eyes and from every pore. This body, all that is left is a pair of broken black robe pants around his waist, but even then it is difficult to hide the divine power. He seems to have returned to the most original existence. Pure Jinmeng blended with purple and appeared lightning-like all over him. Hit him, it's the sword unparalleled. When the soles of the feet touched the ground, the stars of the sky over the sky fell, and the golden patterns on his body. The sized lotus buds bloom, together Hua, Lien blooms on the road. Wu Zi retreats from his pupils, and Jian Wushuang wakes up from a long and chaotic dream in the beginning of the world and walks on this road blankly. Every time he took a step, his consciousness became clear. Long hair spreading to the ends of the hair hangs down the avenue, and every step is flowed with godliness. Everyone is holding their breath, even if they have achieved the invincible supreme acts and heaven too. They feel a kind of unspeakable pressure. That pressure is the purest repression, irrelevant to the realm, and it is another more mysterious level of life. King Jujia's eyes did not have disbelief or jealousy. Some were just the joy from the heart and the most sincere fiery. It was his own pride that could not be touched by any thoughts. Wu Jian's unparalleled realm. How could I not reach the King of Nine? The great giant axe first reacted. Facing the avenue and facing Jian Wushuang, he knelt on one knee without hesitation, and Hong Zhong-like voice sounded, "Greetings to the master of Wushuang Palace." Thousands of disciples knelt together at this moment and shouted in unison, "All disciples in the Palace of Life welcome the master of the Wushuang Palace." His voice shook through the whole place of sadness and sorrow, and Jian Wushuang was completely clear. With purple eyes looking at thousands of disciples, a long-lost smile appeared on his face. For more than 1,000 years of silence, in exchange, it will only be a more vigorous new life. Chapter 45:92. Countless strands of Jinmong were scattered in the wind, blowing to the crowd with the breeze. You don't have to be restrained. You all get up. Jian Wushuang laughed softly. Thousands of disciples only felt gentle under their knees, and a gentle force held everyone up. Xie Wushuang Gongzhu. All the disciples joined together. A body of godlike mansions flowing like tassel converged in his body. He flew into the presence of the giant axe and the of heaven. Looking at the godlike figure in front of him, the eyes of the giant axe supreme were slightly moist, only to say a sentence of Wushuang. Gongzhu secretly wept. Seeing this, Tianzu in extreme stunned him with his elbow and whispered, "I said the old man, the master of Wushuang Palace, has to go out. You should be happy. Why are you crying again? You care for the husband? The husband wants to cry, and how to cry, no one can control it." The giant axe child turned back with the same temper. Tina, Supreme, shook his head helplessly. Jian Wushuang naturally understands the pain that the Supreme Axe Supreme can't let out. Then he put his palm on the shoulder of Supreme Axe, solemnly saying, "Extreme Axe, you can rest assured how the virtual universe came. I will let them roll back. And the debt, they all must be used blood to pay it back." The great axe heard the words and quickly wiped his tears with his sleeves, arching, "The Supreme Axe under the seat of the Temple of Life is supreme and is willing to be dispatched by the master of the Wushuang Palace. The Supreme God of Life under the seat of the Temple of God is willing to be dispatched by the master of the Wushuang Palace." The Supreme God of Heaven also said. King Jiujia smiled and arched his hand. "Jiujia Supreme under the seat of the Temple of Life is willing to be dispatched by the master of Wushuang Palace." Jian Wushuang bowed his head, looking at the disciples of Wanming Life Palace, and rushed towards Xiaoyu, Master Wushuang Palace. In this spiritual practice, there are more than 11,000 disciples in this palace, and 300 disciples have been promoted to the supreme state, ordinary battlefield. While walking in this path of misery, the great Axe Supreme analyzed the general situation, but the battle between the invincible Supreme and the 6 marks void. The giant axe did not continue. As early as the start of this catastrophe, the nearly 46-marked virtual lords of the virtual universe almost controlled the entire battlefield. The high-end combat power cannot be balanced, so the direction of this war will still tilt towards the virtual universe. What's more, there is a horrible existence of the zombie beyond the invincible realm. Jian Wushuang didn't speak at first. "The snake gave it to me. As for the number of invincible supremacy, wait for the tragedy, and then raise 1 or 2. The axe nodded supremely, and then seemed to realize something, and he was shocked. The King of 9 robbers also paused, and a bitterness appeared from his eyes. Is it just for 10,000 years that Jian Wushuang has grown to such an extent? He thought that with his top-notch cultivation, he could fight against Jian Wushuang no matter how bad it was, but everything changed. Jian Wushuang's target is already facing the zombie of that virtual universe. Now I am half-step invincible and supreme. It doesn't matter if I want to come to the zombie of the virtual universe." Jian Wushuang added. The shock rose from the eyes of the giant axe and the heavens. Jian Wushuang was able to slay the supreme divine realm with the ultimate of the realm. He will always be killed across the border to create miracles. Can you even get over that day? However, the sword Wushuang groaned for a while looking at the great axe supreme. It should be troublesome for the great axe. The giant axe is supremely enlightened. Bloodwave supreme. Jian Wushuang watched from a distance. In a mighty divine power, Bloodwave supreme was still condensing. Tianmao shook his head. He has never woken up from Wu Sit, and there must be a great chance waiting for him. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. It was already a half-step invincible supreme before the Bloodwave supreme had become enlightened. It was not difficult to break through the invincible supreme, and it is possible to this day. I am afraid he has already marched towards that more mysterious state. After a moment, all the disciples of the Life Shrine gathered around Jian Wushuang to a slightly open place. He waved under the sky to cast a huge dojo, and then jumped up with the giant axe. Guess who can win? I guess the great axe can win. After all, that is the invincible supreme. Waving a hand can suppress the existence of the ordinary supreme. I guess the Lord of the Warrior's Palace can win. Don't forget, then the Lord of the Warrior's Palace could kill the supreme realm with the ultimate domination. Now, the Lord of the Warrior's Palace is half-step invincible. Easy task? It seems like that. The voices of tens of thousands of disciples were noisy, and there was a lot of discussion, and the sound of humming with respect to nature made all the disciples snoring. Only the strong wind hunted on the sky. The sword-like pair of swords, like of heaven, stood in place, and the mighty divine power infiltrated the ends of the hair and spread out the golden mansions. As soon as the supreme axe came into play, he summoned the axe directly and waited. For Jian Wushuang, he flatly does not regard it as an ordinary half-step invincible supreme. Therefore, in a pair of battles, he immediately elevated his divine power to the invincible supremacy. Master of Wushuang Palace, you will offend next. The giant axe said in a deep voice. The axe in his hand was already trembling. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and his own divine power quietly emerged from the ground. Seeing this, the giant axe waved the giant axe directly, enough to destroy the blazing winds of the star before cutting. However, when dozens of howling winds touched Jian Wushuang's divine power, they melted like ice and snow and died directly. As soon as the giant axe pupil condensed, he knew that ordinary tricks had no effect on Jian Wushuang. Taking a deep breath, he put the axe in front of him, and all the divine power began to be restrained. As the divine power contracted and restrained, the figure of the giant axe began to transform into 10 ways. 20, 30. There are 30 great axe supremes in total, and each one possesses the complete power of the great axe. This is my invincible realm, the supernatural powers I have learned, the one-on-one battle, and I am supreme in the same state. No one can stop it. The giant axe is extremely tough, and his way is also indomitable. One blows the might of the sky, and no one dares to compete with it. Supernatural power open heaven. The endless divine power is all in one. A total of 30 treasures are transformed into a line. The sky in the dojo is transformed into chaos. Just like the original power, any god, ghost, and demon must obey the law, and the turbid air sinks, and the clear air rises. The chaotic sky was easily torn, and the giant axe opened to cut the sword. Everyone held their breath, the shocking look and feel, and even some disciples who were determined to win with swords turned to the axe supreme. The next moment, thousands of purple gold gods rose up in the chaos like the Milky Way Sioux, and at the same time a magnificent, heavenly gate overwhelmed the chaos. Remember the first domain name in this book. Mobile website reading URL